Hi guys, and welcome to Bedtime History Relaxing. Tonight we step into the year 1321 when winter has wrapped a stone monastery in snow, and you are about to sleep in a cell so cold that your blanket feels less like comfort and more like a polite suggestion. Outside, the storm leans against the abbey walls, wind moves over the roof tiles, snow gathers in the courtyard. Somewhere beyond the dark glass of night, trees bend, roads vanish, and the whole world becomes white, silent, and very unfriendly to anyone who forgot decent boots. You probably won't survive this with modern expectations, especially if your idea of roughing it involves weak Wi-Fi and a chilly hotel lobby. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as always, tell us where you are listening from and what time it is in your little corner of the world. Now, dim the lights and let yourself arrive slowly at the monastery gate. You stand beneath a low sky the colour of damp wool. The storm has followed you across the road for the last mile, worrying at your cloak, sliding cold fingers under your collar, filling every fold of cloth with tiny needles of snow. Ahead, the abbey rises out of the whiteness. Not grand in the way a royal palace might be grand, but solid, patient, and deeply convinced that it has seen worse weather than this. Its walls are thick, its windows are narrow, its roofline cuts through the falling snow like the back of some sleeping animal. In 1321, monasteries across Western Europe are more than places of prayer. They are farms, storehouses, schools, guest shelters, employers, landlords, libraries, hospitals of a sort, and occasionally the nearest thing a freezing traveller has to a miracle with a door handle. That is one steady fact of medieval life. A large monastery is a whole small world, enclosed by the stone and rule, carrying its own rhythm through feast days, fasting days, harvests, storms, sickness, and silence. You do not enter with much ceremony. No one throws open golden doors. No choir sings just for you. A lay brother with a lantern peers at your face, decides you are more miserable than dangerous, and guides you inside through a passage where the air changes at once. Not warm exactly. Let us not get carried away. Medieval comfort has a different personality, but the wind no longer strikes your cheeks directly, and that alone feels luxurious. The smell comes first: damp wool, smoke, old stone, beeswax, straw, cold iron, something faintly sour from wet boots and tired bodies. Beneath it all, a dry scent of dust and parchment, as if the abbey has been breathing books for generations. Your footsteps sound too loud. The brother gestures for quiet before you even speak. His finger rises gently to his lips, not unkindly, but with the calm authority of a person who has spent years making silence into a habit. You nod, because what else can you do? The storm mutters behind the walls. Somewhere deeper in the monastery, a bell gives a low, measured note, and the sound spreads through the corridors like dark honey. You follow him past a small courtyard half buried in snow. The cloister arches are only dim shapes now, their stone edges softened by the storm. In the centre lies the garth, the enclosed garden, though tonight it is less garden than white square of sleep. Perhaps in spring there would be herbs, grass, damp earth, bees nosing around flowers. Now there is only snow settling in soft layers, covering paths, benches, and whatever stubborn plant life has not given up until April. A curious little detail survives from many medieval religious houses. Some communities allowed warming rooms, places where monks could briefly sit near a fire, because even holy discipline had to admit that human fingers become useless when frozen. The idea feels oddly tender. The medieval world is often imagined as stern, and it is stern, but it also understands practical mercy. A frozen monk cannot copy a manuscript, tend sheep, chant psalms, or peel turnips. This is not weakness. This is basic management. Still, your destination is not the warming room. Of course not. That would be too generous. You are being taken to a cell. The passage narrows. The lantern flame trembles in its little cage. Your guide sandals whisper over the stone, while your own soaked shoes make a less graceful sound, somewhere between a sigh and an accusation. You pass closed doors. Behind one, you hear a cough. Behind another, the faint scrape of wood. Perhaps a stool moved carefully across the floor. The abbey is alive, but in a guarded way, like an animal sleeping with one eye open. Historians still argue whether the individual experience of monastic life was mainly one of spiritual refuge, strict social discipline, economic duty, or all three woven together so tightly that no monk could have separated them in his own mind. Tonight, as you move through the cold corridor, that debate feels less like a puzzle in a book and more like the texture of the air around you. Refuge. Yes, discipline, certain duty everywhere, and beneath it all the simple human question, will the blanket be thick enough? The brother stops before a low wooden door. It is not dramatic. It is not carved with saints or angels. It is just a door, darkened by age and touch and with a simple latch. He lifts the lantern slightly and pushes it open. Your cell waits inside, small, bare, almost shockingly bare. There is a narrow bed with a straw mattress, a folded blanket, a wooden stool, a peg for clothing, and a small shelf. The wall is stone, pale where frost has breathed into the mortar. A tiny slit window admits no view, only a suggestion of darkness and moving white. The floor is not friendly. The room does not welcome you. It simply permits you to exist inside it. And yet, after the road, it feels strangely safe. The brother sets the lantern down. He gives you a look that may mean sleep while you can, or pray if you cannot, or please do not make this my problem. Medieval expressions can be economical like that. Then he leaves, closing the door with a soft wooden click. Now you're alone. The quiet deepens. Not total quiet, never that. The storm has its own language. It presses at the window slit and drags icy breath through invisible cracks. Snow ticks against the stone in tiny bursts. Far above, roof timbers answer the wind with slow creaks. Somewhere in the wall, water, or maybe thawing frost, makes a faint clicking sound. You can hear your own breathing more clearly than you want to. You remove your damp outer cloak and hang it on the peg. Though it hangs there with the defeated weight of a drowned animal, your fingers are stiff. The skin across your knuckles feels tight and cold. When you sit on the bed, the straw shifts beneath you with a dry rustle, and the mattress releases a smell of hay, dust, and old sleep. There are no soft pillows, no glowing bedside lamp, no phone to check because apparently the 14th century has terrible app support. There is only the lantern, the blanket, the stone, the storm, and your own thoughts beginning to slow because the room gives them nowhere dramatic to go. You touch the blanket. Wool, rough, heavy, and faintly oily from the natural lanolin that still clings to fibres not treated by modern softness. It scratches your palm, but it promises warmth in the blunt way medieval things often do. Not elegance, the usefulness. You lie down carefully. The first contact with the bed is unpleasantly cold. The straw does not embrace you. It arranges itself under protest. You pull the blanket over your body and tuck it around your legs, trying to trap whatever warmth your body can spare. Your breath appears faintly in the lantern light. That seems rude. Somehow, for indoors, outside, the wind surges. The whole cell seems to listen. For a moment, you imagine the countryside beyond the monastery walls. The road you travelled is already disappearing. Cart ruts fill with snow. Hedges become smooth white lines. A village roof sags under fresh weight. Sheep huddle behind hurdles. Somewhere, A traveller less fortunate than you searches for a landmark and finds only darkness. The monastery, for all its cold stone and strict habits, is a lantern in a world that can turn deadly without raising its voice. You begin to understand why enclosed religious houses mattered so much. Not only because monks prayed for souls, though that mattered deeply to medieval minds. Not only because abbeys owned land, stored grain, and copied books, but because stone walls changed the meaning of a winter night. Inside, life becomes scheduled, contained, difficult, but survivable. Outside, the storm has no schedule at all. The lantern flame lowers, shadows climb the walls slowly. You turn on your side and pull the blanket closer under your chin. The wool scratches your neck, and you accept this as a form of affection. Your feet are still cold, your mouthholes, and your nose is cold. Your ears are reconsidering their life choices, but the centre of your body begins, very slowly, to gather warmth. The cell is plain enough to make the mind notice small things. The uneven stone near your face, the smell of wax, the thin line beneath the door where a little corridor darkness waits, the faint rhythm of the storm and rising and falling, as if the whole winter night is breathing against the abbey. You're not comfortable in the modern sense, but you are held. Held by walls raised before you arrived, held by routines older than your worries, held by the soft discipline of a place that tells every person inside it when to wake, when to eat, when to pray, when to work, when to sleep. You may not love that arrangement at noon, but at midnight in a blizzard, it has a certain charm. Your eyelids grow heavier. The lantern flickers once, then steadies. Somewhere beyond the cell, a brother coughs again. Somewhere farther off, the bell waits for the hour when everyone will be pulled from sleep for prayer. You do not know it yet, but the night is not done with you. Monastic rest is not a long private vacation. It is more like a brief pause between obligations, with frost included at no extra charge. For now, though you listen, wind against stone, snow against darkness, straw beneath your shoulder, wool against your chin, your breath slowly finding the same pace as the storm beyond the walls. And in the narrow bed of a monastery cell in the winter of 1321, you drift toward the first shallow layer of sleep, while the abbey keeps watch around you. Sleep comes, but it does not stay for long. The warmth you manage to gather beneath the blanket feels fragile, like a small candle protected between cupped hands. At some uncertain point in the night, while the storm still prowls beyond the walls, a sound reaches through your dreams. A bell. Not loud, not urgent, just steady. One measured note, followed by another. You open your eyes into darkness. For a few confused seconds, you have no idea where you are. The stone wall beside the bed looks strange in the weak glow of dying lantern light. The air feels colder than before. Your blanket has somehow migrated away from one shoulder. This appears to be a universal law of sleeping, regardless of century. Then memory returns. The monastery, the storm, the narrow cell, the year 1321, and now, apparently the middle of the night, the bell sounds again. You groan inwardly. The monks, unfortunately, covered strong opinions about sleeping uninterrupted. One of the defining features of medieval monastic life is the practice of night offices, especially matins, a service often held long before sunrise. While ordinary villagers are tucked beneath blankets, monks rise from their beds to pray, chant, and listen to scripture. Their entire day is divided by religious observance, creating a rhythm that turns time itself into an act of devotion. You lie perfectly still for a moment, entertaining the fantasy that perhaps nobody will notice if you remain in bed. Unfortunately, the bell continues. The abbey notices everything. A faint movement echoes through the corridor outside. Doors open, sandaled feet shuffle across stone somewhere nearby. A sleepy monk coughs. The monastery is waking, or perhaps waking is the wrong word. The monastery never seems fully asleep. You sit upright and immediately regret it. Cold air slips beneath the blanket and attacks every exposed inch of skin with medieval enthusiasm. The cell feels even smaller now. The darkness presses close. Frost has crept farther along the edges of the window slit. The lantern has nearly exhausted itself, leaving only a weak amber glow. You pull your cloak around your shoulders and stand. The floor is cold enough to inspire immediate spiritual reflection. A gust rattles the window opening. Outside, the storm still owns the countryside. Inside, human routine pushes stubbornly onward. You open the door and step into the corridor. Other figures emerge from their cells. Nobody speaks. Faces remain hidden beneath hoods. Lanterns sway gently, throwing moving shadows against the walls. The entire procession resembles a line of ghosts who have collectively agreed to attend an extremely early appointment. The silence feels unusual to modern instincts. Today, silence is often treated as absence. Here, silence is presence. It is something actively maintained, a discipline, a tool, a companion. You join the slow movement towards the church. The corridors twist through the heart of the monastery. Stone arches appear and disappear in the dim light. Every surface seems shaped by generations of hands and footsteps. The abbey has absorbed centuries of routine. As you walk, you become aware of the sounds that remain once conversation disappears. The scrape of sandals, the flutter of cloth, the crackle of torchlight, the distant wind, your own breathing. A lesser-known medieval curiosity appears in some monastic records. Certain monks reportedly struggled with drowsiness so dramatically during night services that abbots occasionally complained about brothers falling asleep while standing. Human nature, it seems, remains impressively consistent across centuries. You cannot entirely blame them. Your own eyes still feel heavy. The church entrance opens ahead. You step inside. The space immediately changes your sense of scale. The cell was narrow and intimate. The church is vast. Dark vaults rise overhead. Massive columns disappear into shadow. Candle flames flicker before altars. Their light barely reaches the upper stonework, leaving much of the ceiling hidden in darkness. The air smells of wax, incense, damp stone, and old wood. It feels colder here than you expect. Cathedrals and monasteries often look warm in paintings. Reality is less cooperative. Large stone buildings are excellent at storing cold. You move into a choir stall among rows of carved wooden seats. The monks settle around you. Then comes the chanting. Soft at first, a single voice, then another, then many. The sound expands through the church like ripples across water. Latin words rise and fall in measured patterns. Individual syllables blend together. Notes drift upward into darkness. You may not understand every phrase, but understanding is not entirely the point. The experience surrounds you. The sound becomes architecture. The rhythm becomes time. Outside, the storm continues to strike the walls. Inside, the chant remains calm. A widely accepted historical observation notes that monastic communities preserved enormous amounts of religious, literary, and administrative knowledge throughout the Middle Ages. Night after night, year after year, generations followed these same patterns. Prayer structured not only belief, but memory itself. You listen, the contrast feels remarkable. Beyond the monastery lies uncertainty, and roads disappear beneath snow. Travellers become lost, harvests fail, kings quarrel, borders shift. Inside these walls, bells continue ringing exactly when they should. For a medieval person, that consistency carries enormous comfort. The service unfolds slowly. Readings follow chants. Silence follows readings. Candles flicker. Someone shifts weight carefully. Another brother suppresses what appears to be a heroic yawn. You sympathize. Time softens. The boundaries between minutes become difficult to track. At some point, your attention drifts toward the stained glass windows, though little colour is visible in the darkness. During daylight, they would scatter jewel tones across the floor. Tonight, they are only black shapes against blackness. Historians continue to discuss whether medieval monks experienced these repetitive daily rituals primarily as spiritual liberation or as demanding discipline. Perhaps the answer changed from person to person, day to day, even hour to hour. At this moment, sitting in the cold church before dawn, you suspect it might be both. The service eventually concludes, not dramatically, no grand finale, no triumphant ending. The chants simply fade. The final prayer settles into silence. Then the monks rise. You follow them back into the corridors. The abbey feels different now, not brighter, not warmer, but somehow more awake. The community has gathered. The prayers have been spoken. The night has been acknowledged. As you move through the cloister, you glimpse the courtyard beyond the arches. Snow continues to fall. The sight is unexpectedly beautiful. The storm has softened. Instead of violent gusts, flakes drift quietly through lantern light. The garth resembles a blank page, every path erased, every edge rounded, every detail hidden beneath white. For a moment you stop. No one rushes you. The monastery understands pauses. You watch snow settle onto stone that has stood through countless winters. Monks have crossed this courtyard during storms before. Perhaps during the reign of one king, then another, then another. Generations have come and gone while the cloister remained. That continuity feels strangely reassuring. A peculiar story survives from certain medieval traditions claiming that some monks believed extraordinary snowfalls could symbolize divine cleansing or renewal. Whether widely accepted or simply local interpretation remains uncertain, but the image lingers pleasantly in the imagination. The brother beside you adjusts his hood and continues walking. You follow, the corridor bends. The familiar door to your cell appears once more, back already. The night office has lasted longer than it seemed, or perhaps shorter. Time behaves differently when measured by bells instead of clocks. You enter the room. The air remains cold. The straw mattress remains unimpressed by your return. The blanket still looks rough. Yet everything feels slightly more welcoming now. You understand your place within the monastery's rhythm a little better. Outside, the storm continues its long conversation with the walls. Inside, another period of sleep waits. Not many hours, just enough. You remove your cloak, settle onto the mattress, pull the wool blanket close again. The fabric scratches your cheek. The straw rustles beneath your shoulder. Somewhere in the distance, a door closes softly, then silence returns. Not empty taunts, living fortanto, the kind that fills monasteries after prayer. Your breathing slows. The cold no longer feels quite so sharp. The bell has done its work. The church has spoken its ancient words. The community rests once more. Beyond the narrow window slit, snow drifts through darkness. Within the stone walls of the abbey, surrounded by sleeping brothers and centuries of routine, you allow your eyes to close again. The night still has many hours left before dawn, and somewhere beyond sleep, another bell is already waiting. Sleep returns more easily this time. The monastery has already claimed part of your attention. The unfamiliar noises that seemed strange earlier now fit together into a pattern. The groan of timber, the whisper of a wind through cracks in stone, the distant settling of doors, even the occasional cough somewhere beyond the wall no longer startles you. Your body begins to understand where it is. That understanding matters. Humans are remarkably adaptable creatures. Give us enough time and we can learn to sleep beside oceans, beside roads, beneath tents, inside castles, aboard ships, and apparently inside a freezing monastic cell in the year 1321. The storm outside continues, but it feels farther away now. Perhaps the abbey walls are holding. Perhaps your mind is simply growing accustomed to the sound. Perhaps both. At some point, however, you wake again, not because of a bell, not because of a draft, because of krons. The realization arrives slowly. Something has changed. You open your eyes, the darkness remains, the cold remains, the narrow cell remains exactly as before, yet the storm has weakened. Instead of constant wind pressing against the walls, there are now pauses between gusts, long pauses. You lie still and listen. Nothing, then a soft rush of air, then quiet again. The absence feels almost louder than the noise. You begin to appreciate something medieval monks understood very well. Silence is not empty. Silence has texture. Modern life rarely allows complete quiet. There is always a machine humming somewhere, traffic passing in the distance, electricity buzzing invisibly through walls. Even at night, the world often murmurs. Here, in this monastery, silence becomes noticeable enough to study. You pull the blanket higher around your shoulders and remain still. The darkness encourages listening. A faint scrape reaches you from somewhere outside the room. Footsteps, slow, measured, then gone. Perhaps a monk heading toward another duty. Perhaps a brother checking lamps. Perhaps someone unable to sleep. The abbey breathes around you. One of the enduring realities of monastic life was the importance placed upon controlled speech. Many religious communities maintained strict rules governing conversation. Some periods of the day allowed discussion, others encouraged complete silence. Certain monasteries even developed systems of hand signals to communicate practical needs without speaking aloud. Imagine trying to explain that you need more bread using gestures alone. Human creativity tends to flourish whenever rules become inconvenient. A few medieval records describe surprisingly elaborate sign systems. Different motions could indicate food, books, tools, or specific daily tasks. It sounds almost like an ancient workplace inventing its own secret language. You smile slightly beneath the blanket, then you remember how cold your nose is and stop smiling. The silence continues. Gradually, your thoughts begin wandering. Without conversation, entertainment, or distraction, the mind naturally turns inward. What would life be like if every day followed this rhythm? Wake, pray, work, eat, pray again, sleep, repeat. At first glance it sounds restrictive, yet there is another side to it. There is freedom in knowing exactly what comes next. No endless decisions, no overflowing schedule, no constant notifications demanding attention, no mysterious email arriving at 11 o'clock at night to ruin your mood. The monastery removes countless choices. In return, it offers structure. Whether that bargain feels comforting or oppressive probably depends on the individual. Scholars continue debating the extent to which medieval monks experienced silence as psychological peace versus personal struggle. The answer almost certainly varied. Some likely found profound comfort in contemplation. Others probably spent long afternoons wishing Brother Thomas would stop humming during manuscript work. You roll onto your back, the ceiling remains invisible. Only darkness stretches above, yet your awareness of the room grows sharper. You can sense its dimensions now. The distance from bed to wall, the location of the stool, the rough edge of the shelf, the draft slipping through the window slit. Human beings become surprisingly good at mapping spaces without sight. Outside, another faint gust brushes the building. Snow taps softly against stone. The sound reminds you that an entire world exists beyond the monastery. Villages, roads, forests, fields sleeping beneath winter, families gathered around hearth fires. Merchants waiting for a better weather, travellers hoping for shelter. The abbey feels isolated, yet it is connected to all of them. Monasteries did not exist apart from society. They depended on surrounding communities and often supported them in return. Crops, livestock, labour, education, charity, hospitality, and prayer all flowed between abbey and the village. The walls separate worlds. they do not completely divide them. A particularly curious medieval belief occasionally appeared in local traditions. Some people thought intense silence could make the soul more receptive to divine messages. Whether anyone actually heard heavenly voices is another matter entirely, but the idea reveals something important. Silence was not viewed as absence, it was viewed as possibility. You find that notion oddly beautiful. The room remains dark, the cold remains steady, yet your thoughts begin slowing. Not because you are exhausted, because there is very little competing for attention. The monastery strips experience down to essentials on stone or wood or wool or breath, time. Even the weather feels simpler here. The storm is not content for a news report. It is not a forecast on a screen. It is merely snow falling beyond a wall. Nothing more, nothing less. You close your eyes again. For a while, sleep hovers nearby without fully arriving. Your mind drifts through fragments of observation. The candle smell lingering in your clothing from the church, the sound of chanting echoing beneath vaulted ceilings, the snow-covered garth glimpsed through cloister arches, the brother who admitted you through the gate, the rough blanket pressing against your chin. Memory settles these details carefully into place. Another quiet interval passes. Then, from somewhere distant, comes a small unexpected sound, laughter, brief, suppressed immediately, gone almost before you're certain you heard it. Yet it was unmistakably laughter. You imagine two monks sharing some tiny moment of humour before remembering where they are. Humanity always finds ways to slip through rules. A well-established historical observation is that medieval monasteries, despite their reputation for severity, contained communities of ordinary people. Monks experienced friendship, irritation, affection, boredom, curiosity, and amusement just like everyone else. The image feels comforting. It is easy to imagine the Middle Ages as a world populated entirely by solemn faces and candlelight. Reality was more complicated. People still joked, still complained, still found ways to smile. Even during snowstorms, even before dawn, even while wearing scratchy wool garments that would probably inspire modern protests. The laughter fades completely. Silence returns. This time it feels warmer somehow, not physically. The room remains determinedly cold, but emotionally. The abbey no longer feels like a mysterious institution filled with strangers. It feels inhabited. Lives are unfolding around you. Lives following routines refined across generations. Lives connected by prayer, labour, and shared experience. You are only a visitor, yet for this night, you belong inside the pattern, outside the walls. Winter continues its patient work. Snow gathers along rooftops. Branches collect white burdens. Birds vanish beneath fresh drifts. Fields disappear under smooth blankets of ice and powder. The countryside sleeps. Inside the monastery, silence watches over everything. Not harsh silence. Not lonely silence. A quieter companion. One that settles gently into corridors, cells, chapels, and cloisters. You breathe in slowly. The air smells faintly of stone and wool. You breathe out. The darkness remains calm. Your muscles loosen. Your thoughts become softer around the edges. The questions that seemed interesting a few minutes ago no longer demand answers. The silence has taken them. Not permanently, just for now. Soon enough another bell will ring. Another duty will begin. Another cycle of prayer and work will unfold, but not yet. For this small stretch of night, the monastery rests. The storm whispers instead of roars. The corridors remain still. The church waits in darkness, and you drift at last into deeper sleep, and surrounded by stone walls, winter air, and the extraordinary quiet that has shaped monastic life for centuries. When the next bell reaches you, it does not feel quite as cruel, not kind exactly. Let us not give the bell too much credit. But your body has begun to surrender to the monastery's rhythm, and surrender can be surprisingly peaceful when the alternative is arguing with stone walls before dawn. You wake in the small cell with the wool blanket still tucked beneath your chin, your face cool, your feet only partly forgiven by warmth. Outside the slit window, the storm has softened into a steady hush. The world beyond the abbey is still hidden. The world inside is beginning again. You rise slowly, careful not to let the blanket fall too quickly. The cold is waiting for any mistake, patient as a tax collector. Your cloak feels stiff where dampness has dried unevenly during the night. You wrap it around yourself and step into the corridor, joining the quiet movement of monks and brothers heading towards the early prayers, then onward into the first practical tasks of the day. By the time food appears, you're awake enough to be hungry. That is its own medieval achievement. The refectory is long, plain, and dim in the winter morning. Wooden tables stretch through the room, benches wait beneath them. The floor carries the faint scent of wet rushes, smoke, old wood, and many years of simple meals. Light enters reluctantly through narrow windows, grey and thin, filtered through the storm outside. You sit with the others. No one bursts into cheerful breakfast conversation. This is not a cosy village inn where someone slaps your shoulder and tells you the latest gossip about whose pig escaped again. In many monastic houses, meals are eaten in silence while a reader speaks from scripture, saints' lives, or religious instruction. The body eats, the mind listens, the tongue, for once in human history, is not invited to give opinions. A well-documented feature of medieval monastic dining is this blend of nourishment and discipline. Food is not only food here, it is part of order, obedience, humility, and shared routine. Even chewing becomes quieter when everyone around you seems spiritually committed to not sounding like livestock. A brother moves along the tables and bread is placed before you. It is coarse, dark and heavy, made from grains that do not resemble the soft white loaves of modern supermarket dreams. Rye, barley, maslin, or mixed grains may appear depending on region, wealth, and season. In winter, freshness is a luxury with a short lifespan. The loaf before you has a serious personality. You break it with both hands, the crust resists, the inside is dense and faintly sour. You raise it to your mouth and take a bite. It tastes of grain, smoke, earth, and effort. Not delicious in a festive sense, not bad either. It fills the mouth slowly and asks to be taken seriously. This is not snack food. This is survival shaped into a loaf. Beside it comes a cup of weak ale, thin ale, small ale, the everyday drink of many medieval communities. Safer and more sustaining than questionable water in many places, though the exact quality of local water could vary widely. This ale is not the roaring tavern drink of drunken songs. It is mild, low in alcohol, cloudy, and faintly yeasty. It tastes like watered-down bread with ambitions. You sip. It is cool, not refreshing exactly, but grounding. Your stomach accepts it with gratitude. After a night in a stone cell, the simplest meal becomes meaningful. Bread, ale, perhaps a little pottage, maybe beans, peas, or lentils later in the day. In a wealthy monastery, diet can be more varied. In stricter houses, especially during fasting seasons, meat may be limited or absent. Fish often occupies that convenient category medieval rules found useful, because apparently even dietary restrictions appreciate loopholes. An intriguing detail from the period concerns the complicated relationship monks had with meat. Many monastic rules discouraged or restricted it, especially for healthy monks, but infirmaries could allow meat for the sick. Over time, some communities found creative ways around restrictions, including separate dining spaces or generous interpretations of what counted as necessary. Human beings, even pious ones, have always been talented at negotiating with rules when dinner is involved. You chew another piece of bread, the reader's voice travels through the room. You do not catch every word, Latin, echo, tiredness, and hunger form a powerful alliance against comprehension. Still, the tone matters. It is calm, measured, familiar to everyone here. The monks listen while eating, or appear to listen. You suspect some are mostly thinking about whether there will be more bread. The storm presses faintly against the refectory windows. Snowlight gives the room a pale, underwater feeling. Bowls move quietly. Cups are lifted. Bread is broken. Wooden benches creak under shifting bodies. The meal is plain, but it is communal, and that changes everything. Alone in your cell, cold felt personal. Here, cold is shared, hunger is shared, discipline is shared. Even discomfort becomes easier when everyone accepts it together. Researchers remain divided on how ordinary monks emotionally experience such plain daily meals. Some see them as expressions of sincere ascetic devotion, training the body away from excess. Others point out that monasteries varied greatly, and some became wealthy enough to enjoy better food than many peasants outside their walls. Both truths can sit at the same table. Medieval life rarely offers one neat answer and then politely goes away. You glance along the benches. Faces are calm, though not all serene. One brother looks half asleep. Another eats with brisk efficiency. An older monk holds his cup in both hands, warming his fingers around it even though the drink itself is barely warm. His expression is thoughtful, or perhaps he's simply deciding whether his teeth approve of the bread. The reader continues. Outside, the wind rises briefly. The room seems to pause without stopping. Then the gust passes. Spoons return to bowls. The small life of the refectory resumes. You notice how strongly food connects this enclosed world to the land outside. The bread began in fields. The ale began in grain. The pottage comes from stores carefully gathered before winter. Every bite represents ploughing, sowing, harvesting, threshing, grinding, brewing, baking, carrying, counting, storing, and praying that rats do not become overly ambitious. Monasteries are spiritual houses. Yes, they're also logistical machines. If the granary fails, prayer does not become less sincere, but the monks become much thinner. The thought is almost funny. Almost. You take another sip of ale. The flavour is beginning to seem pleasant simply because it belongs to the morning. Your modern standards are weakening. This is how the Middle Ages wins. First you reject the hard bread, then you tolerate it. Then, after enough cold and hunger, you start thinking, actually, this is not bad. The meal ends without ceremony. There is no lingering over coffee, no second cup while scrolling through messages, no warm pastry dusted with sugar. The bowls are cleared, cups are gathered. The reader closes the text. Benches scrape softly as the monks rise. You stand with them. Your body feels steadier now. The bread sits heavily in your stomach, not like indulgence, but like a small shield against the cold. The ale leaves a faint grainy taste on your tongue. The refectory empties into the corridors, where the morning waits with its list of duties. You step back into the passage. The air bites your cheeks, but less sharply than before. Food has changed the day, not dramatically. No heroic transformation, just enough warmth from within to continue. And that is the quiet truth of winter life here. Survival is made from small continuations. A piece of bread, a cup of ale, a shared bench, a rule observed, a bell answered, a body persuaded to rise again. As you follow the others toward the next hour, the storm beyond the walls keeps falling in white silence. The monastery does not hurry. It absorbs the weather, the cold, the hunger, the prayers, and the breath of everyone inside. You carry the taste of coarse bread with you into the dim corridor, and somewhere ahead, beyond the smell of smoke and damp wool, another part of the abbey waits in pale snowlight, filled with parchment, ink, and the patient scratch of quills. The corridor carries you away from the refectory with the taste of coarse bread still resting on your tongue. It is not the kind of flavour that disappears quickly. It lingers, grainy and faintly sour, like the memory of a field after harvest. the weak ale has settled into your stomach, and with it comes a modest courage, not a heroic courage. You're not about to stride into the blizzard and wrestle winter into submission, but you are ready to follow the monks through another cold passage without making a tragic face every 3 steps. That is progress. The monastery has shifted from night into morning, though the storm makes daylight uncertain. Snowlight seeps through narrow openings, pale and indirect. The walls seem less black now, more grey, more textured, as if each stone has slowly remembered itself. Your footsteps join the quiet movement of the community. Ahead, a doorway opens into a room that feels different from the rest of the abbey. Not warmer, exactly, again we must be honest, but brighter. The scriptorium lies under winter light. Long tables stand near the windows, positioned to catch every possible scrap of daylight. Stools wait beneath them. Shelves hold scraped parchment, folded quires, inkhorns, knives, rulers, pigments, and the little practical mysteries of bookmaking. The room smells of vellum, dust, lamp smoke, glue, and something sharp from ink. You step inside carefully. This is a place where movement becomes smaller. Voices, if permitted at all, would be low. Hands matter here. Eyes matter. Patience matters. A firmly established detail from medieval monastic culture is that many monasteries preserved and copied texts by hand, including religious works, legal documents, classical writings, chronicles, letters, and administrative records. Not every monk was a scribe, and not every monastery produced lavish books, but scriptoria became symbols of learning because so much written culture passed through rooms like this. You approach one of the tables. A monk sits hunched over the parchment, his shoulders wrapped in wool, his fingers stained near the nails. He holds a quill with careful pressure, guiding black letters into narrow lines. Beside him lies a small knife, used not for drama, but for scraping mistakes from the surface. Medieval writing is more forgiving than carving stone, but only slightly. Careless blot can ruin hours of work. The snow outside lends the room a strange softness. Light enters through the narrow windows and lies across the parchment in pale bands. It turns the page almost luminous beyond the glass or horn-covered opening. Flakes drift past like slow ash. The monk does not look up. His quill scratches gently. Scratch, pause, scratch, pause, dip, scratch again. The sound is small, yet once you notice it, fills the room. Other brothers work at neighbouring tables. One rules lines. Another prepares a sheet. A younger one grinds pigment with a patience that suggests either discipline or fear of being corrected. A senior monk examines a page closely, his face lined with concentration. No one is rushing. Books cannot be rushed in 1321, they must be built. Animal skin becomes parchment, parchment becomes page, ink becomes letters, letters become memory, memory becomes something that may outlive everyone in the room, which is a rather dramatic thought for a morning that began with hard bread. One fascinating little side note concerns marginal drawings. Medieval manuscripts sometimes contain playful, bizarre, or even comically rude images in the margins, including animals pretending to be people, knights fighting snails, strange hybrid creatures, and monks who may have had more imagination than their abbot strictly requested. So while the main text might be solemn, the edges of the page occasionally behave like someone whispered, "What if we added a tiny rabbit with a sword? Humanity is wonderful and unserious." You lean closer to a finished page laid carefully aside. The letters are dark and regular, each one shaped by the discipline. Red marks guide the eye. A decorated initial blooms at the beginning of a passage, curling in blue and green. Not as lavish as a royal commission, perhaps, but still beautiful. The page holds winter light the way ice holds dawn. The work feels intimate. Every mark requires a body. A hand must grip the quill. A back must bend. Eyes must strain. Fingers must endure cold. You suddenly understand why the warming room matters. A frozen hand does not produce graceful script. A hand too numb to feel the quill might transform sacred Latin into accidental soup. Nobody wants that. Modern scholars offer several explanations for how central manuscript copying truly was in daily monastic life. Because communities differed widely, some houses were major centres of book production, others focused more on agriculture, hospitality, administration, or prayer. The image of every monk endlessly copying manuscripts is too simple. But the written word undeniably held enormous importance in religious culture. The monk before you pauses and flexes his fingers, just once, a small movement, then he continues. You feel the chill more sharply now that you're standing still. The room may be brighter, but stone keeps its own counsel. A brazier might be present in some places, though fire near parchment is not exactly an ideal partnership. Heat comforts monks, flame eats libraries. Medieval life is often a negotiation between one problem and a worse problem. On a nearby table, you notice tools arranged with almost ceremonial neatness. A pumice stone for smoothing parchment, a straight edge, a sharpened quill, a small container of ink, a cloth, a thin blade. Everything has purpose. The simplicity is pleasing. No clutter beyond usefulness, no decorative distractions, only what the work requires. Outside, snow continues falling. But in the scriptorium, winter becomes strangely distant. The storm still exists. Of course, it presses against the windows and dims the sky. Yet inside this room, attention gathers around tiny marks on pale skin. The world shrinks to a line of text. You imagine the journey of a book leaving this place. Perhaps it remains in the monastery library for generations. Perhaps it travels to another house. Perhaps a noble patron receives it. Perhaps it survives wars, damp, insects, careless owners, and the enthusiastic nibbling of mice. Or perhaps it disappears, scraped clean and reused, burned by accident, lost in a chest, dissolved by mould. Survival is never guaranteed, not for people, not for books, not even for carefully copied wisdom. The thought gives every page a fragile dignity. You move along the table quietly. A younger monk glances at you, then quickly lowers his eyes again. His page shows uneven letters. Less confident than the older scribe's hand, you feel an odd tenderness toward him. Somewhere in this cold room, skill is being learned one line at a time. Mistakes are scraped, fingers ache, pride is swallowed, progress happens slowly. There is something deeply sleepy about watching careful work. The repeated motion, the soft scratch of quills, the muted light, the lack of hurry, even the cold becomes part of the rhythm. You stand near a window and look out across the monastery grounds. The cloister roof wears a thick white edge. The courtyard is smooth and untouched, except where a narrow path has been cleared. Beyond the walls, the storm hides the fields entirely. Inside, ink dries. That contrast stays with you. Outside, weather erases. Inside, writing preserves. Snow covers tracks, roads, boundaries, and memories of movement. Ink fixes words in place. It is not difficult to see why medieval people valued books with such reverence. A manuscript represents time captured by hand. It holds voices that can cross centuries. If damp, fire, war, and hungry insects can be politely discouraged. A brother carries a stack of prepared sheets past you. He moves slowly, almost reverently. You step aside. The pages whisper faintly against each other. For a moment, the sound resembles falling snow. Then the bell rings again, somewhere beyond the room. Soft, measured, inevitable. The scribes do not startle. They pause with the calm resignation of people whose lives are divided into sacred interruptions. Quills are set down, ink is covered, pages are protected, stools scrape gently against stone. The work will wait. The text will continue later. The storm will continue too. You follow the brothers out of the scriptorium, carrying with you the smell of ink and parchment, the glimmer of snowlight on pale pages, and the memory of tiny letters forming patiently in the cold. Behind you, the room empties into stillness. The unfinished manuscripts remain on their tables like sleeping birds, folded into silence until hands return. Ahead, the cloister opens again, its covered walkway circling the white garden where snow has gathered through the morning, softening stone, swallowing paths, and inviting the next quiet passage around the heart of the monastery. You leave the scriptorium with the soft scratch of quills still lingering in your mind. For a few moments, the world outside the manuscript room feels almost too large. The corridor opens before you, dim and cold, carrying the faint smell of smoke from some distant hearth and the cleaner scent of snow blown in through hidden cracks. Behind you, ink rests on parchment. Ahead, the cloister waits with its pale winter light. You step beneath the covered walkway. The cloister is not simply a passage, it is the quiet centre of the monastery, a square of movement wrapped around a square of stillness. Arches line the inner side, opening onto the garth, where the garden lies buried under snow. The covered path protects you from the falling flakes, but not from the cold. Winter has entered everything. It has settled into stone, wood, wool, breath, and bone. The garth in the middle is almost featureless now. Snow has smoothed it into silence. Only the faint shapes of low plants and buried edging stones remain beneath the white surface. In another season, this space might hold herbs, grass, small paths, perhaps a tree or a simple well. Now it feels like a blank page, remembering the manuscripts you just left behind. Outside, snow erases. Inside, writing preserves. Here, between those two truths, the cloister holds both. You walk slowly. The monks move around the square in measured steps, their dark robes making gentle shadows against the pale light. Some pass with eyes lowered. Some carry small objects for work or worship. A few seem to be walking for the sake of walking, letting the enclosed path loosen stiff limbs after long sitting or prayer. Medieval cloisters were central spaces in many monasteries, often connecting the church, chapter house, refectory, dormitory, and work areas. They were practical corridors, but also places of contemplation, reading, discipline, and quiet movement. In a world without heated hallways or soft carpets, even a covered walkway around a snowy garden could feel like thoughtful design. Your shoes whisper over the stone. A faint powder of snow has blown onto the inner edge of the path. It melts where feet have passed, then freezes again in thin, treacherous patches. You walk carefully, because nothing ruins a solemn medieval morning quite like slipping in front of monks who are trying very hard not to laugh. The arches frame the falling snow. Each opening gives you a slightly different view of the garth. From one angle, you see the white surface unbroken. From another, the cloister roof drops melting beads from its edge, each one darkening a small spot before the cold claims it. The sound is delicate. Drip. Pause. Drip. Somewhere above. Wind moves along the roof tiles with a low sigh. The cloister encourages repetition. You pass one column, then another, then another. Each looks similar, but not identical. The hand that shaped them left tiny differences in curve, wear, and surface. You notice chips at the base where countless feet have passed. You notice a place where stone has been polished by generations of hands. You notice how time leaves itself everywhere, not loudly, but patiently. A curious custom in some monastic settings involved assigned places for reading or contemplation along the cloister, where a monk might sit with a text during certain hours. Imagine trying to concentrate on theology while your fingers are numb. Your stomach is still negotiating with hard bread, and brother whoever keeps coughing 3 arches away. Spiritual focus, apparently, had to be practiced under realistic conditions. You continue along the covered walk. The silence here differs from the silence of your cell. In the cell, silence was intimate and close. In the church, it was vast and formal. In the refectory, it was disciplined. Here, silence moves. It walks beside you. The cloister is a place where quiet has footsteps. You pass a monk standing near one of the arches, looking out at the snow. His face is mostly hidden beneath his hood, but his posture suggests attention rather than idleness. Perhaps he is praying. Perhaps he is thinking of spring planting. Perhaps he is wondering whether the roof leak near the East Walk has worsened overnight. Medieval contemplation and building maintenance were likely closer companions than paintings suggest. Specialists still debate how much time monks in different orders actually spent in private meditation compared with communal worship and labour. The surviving rules and ideals tell us what communities valued, but daily practice could shift according to wealth, weather, local leadership, illness, and the endless demands of keeping a large household alive. That thought feels important here. The cloister looks timeless, yet every day inside it must be practical. Someone clears snow, someone repairs gutters, someone counts stores, someone tends animals, someone copies texts, someone sings the offices even when tired. The beauty of monastic life does not float above ordinary labour, it rests upon it. You turn the corner, the angle of the wind changes, and cold air slips through the arches with sudden force. Your cloak lifts slightly, the wool brushes your legs. You pull it closer and keep walking. The storm has not ended, it has merely become quieter. Snow still falls beyond the covered roof, soft but constant, like a thought that refuses to leave. The garden surface grows thicker, hiding every previous mark. If anyone crossed it earlier, their tracks are gone now. The monks do not cross it, they circle it. There is something soothing about that. The enclosed garden remains untouched at the centre, while human life moves around it. Prayer, hunger, work, cold, memory, fatigue, and duty all pass along the edges. The snow receives none of it directly, it simply lies there, bright and still, reminding everyone that the world can be held without being used. You pause near another archer, your breath appears faintly in the air. The stone beneath your hand is icy. You look across the garth and notice a dark shape at the far side. Perhaps a small shrub weighted with snow. Its branches bend but do not break. A small image, yes. But medieval people were attentive to such things. Weather, plants, animals, light. And seasons were not background scenery. They were part of survival, faith, labour, and meaning. A less common belief in medieval devotional culture connected enclosed gardens with purity, inwardness, and spiritual protection. Not every monk strolling through a freezing cloister was probably composing elegant symbolism in his head, but the setting itself invited reflection. A protected garden inside stone walls, a white storm outside, a body moving slowly between the two. You begin walking again. Your thoughts drift back to the cell where you first lay beneath rough wool. Listening to the storm, you remember the bell calling you from sleep. You remember the refectory bread that tasted like a field compressed into a brick. You remember the scriptorium page glowing in snowlight. Each place in the monastery has offered a different kind of stillness. Now the cloister gathers them together. It links everything. You can imagine spending months here, years even, learning the abbey by repeated passage. You would know which stones loosen in rain, which arch catches the strongest wind, which corner holds warmth longest after the sun appears, which brother walks quickly, which one always slows near the garden. Modern life often values novelty. This place teaches recognition, the same path. Taken again and again becomes deeper each time. The same bell, heard again and again, becomes less command than pulse, The same snow falling on the same stones becomes part of a winter memory older than any one person. You complete the circuit slowly. No one announces it. No one congratulates you for surviving a walk around a courtyard. Though honestly, the ice patch deserves respect. The corridor ahead leads toward the day's practical work. The monastery will not remain in contemplation forever. Bread must be baked, floors swept, animals fed, books guarded, fires tended, sick brothers visited, roofs watched. Snow moved where it blocks doors and left alone where it merely looks beautiful. You take one last look at the garth. The snow is still falling, not heavily, not dramatically, just steadily, patiently, without concern for human schedules. Then you turn away from the white square and follow the covered passage toward the busier heart of the abbey, where wool, cold hands, and necessary labour wait beneath the long breath of winter. You leave the quiet circuit of the cloister and follow the flow of the monastery into the practical hours of the day. The snowy garden disappears behind stone arches. The pale light of winter remains, but now it is filtered through workrooms, passages, storehouses, and doorways where life continues regardless of weather. Prayer may shape the rhythm of the abbey, but labour keeps it standing. The cold reminds you of this immediately. A draught slips beneath a door and brushes your ankles. Somewhere ahead, a heavy wooden gate opens with a groan. You hear the scrape of tools, the thump of a barrel being moved, and the distant lowing of livestock from an outbuilding beyond the main complex. The monastery is awake, not noisily, not chaotically, just steadily. You follow a lay brother through a corridor where damp wool cloaks hang from pegs. The smell here is stronger than in the church or scriptorium. Wet wool has a personality all its own. It smells faintly earthy, slightly animal, and entirely unconcerned with modern fragrance standards. The brother disappears into another room, leaving you beside a doorway that opens onto a work area. Inside, several monks and servants are occupied with ordinary tasks. One repairs a wooden tool handle. Another sorts sacks of grain. A third checks a ledger, comparing written records against stored supplies. No one appears particularly dramatic. History often hides its most important moments inside activities that seem boring. Records from the period show that monasteries functioned as complex economic centres. They managed land, livestock, food stores, rents, workshops, mills, and countless practical responsibilities. A successful abbey required organisation as much as devotion. Someone had to know how much grain remained, whether the sheep were healthy, and if enough firewood had been gathered before winter tightened its grip. You watch a monk inspect a stack of split logs. The wood is neatly arranged according to size. That suddenly feels very wise. Firewood in summer is useful. Firewood during a storm is treasure. Every log represents work completed months earlier, trees selected, trees cut, wood carried, wood dried, wood stored. Winter rewards preparation. It is difficult to negotiate with January once January arrives. A younger worker enters carrying an armful of kindling. Snowflakes cling stubbornly to his cloak. As the warmth of the room touches them, they melt into dark spots across the wool. He sets the bundle down, rubs his hands together briefly, then returns outside for another load. No complaint, no speech, just another task completed. You begin noticing how much of monastic life depends upon repetition. Not repetition as punishment, repetition as survival. The same paths, the same prayers, the same chores, the same bells. Over time, repetition becomes reliability. Reliability becomes stability, and stability becomes a kind of comfort. A surprisingly human detail appears in surviving records from some religious houses. Monks occasionally received reprimands for neglecting practical duties, arriving late, mismanaging supplies, or simply failing to meet expected standards. The image of perfect discipline every hour of every day exists mostly in imagination. Real communities contained ordinary people, and ordinary people sometimes forgot things. That thought makes the abbey feel even more alive. You move deeper into the work areas. The air changes again. Now you smell straw, fresh cut wood, cold stone, stored grain, a faint trace of smoke. Every room has its own atmosphere. Every room tells you what matters there. You pass an open doorway and glimpse shelves lined with preserved food, dried peas, stored onions, sacks of grain, containers sealed against dampness. Winter turns abundance into accounting. Every item has to last. Outside, snow continues drifting from the sky. Inside, calculations continue. How much flour remains, how much ale, how much fuel, how many mouths must be fed until spring. These questions may lack romance, but they determine whether an institution thrives or struggles. The exact balance between spiritual and practical responsibilities remains a topic of discussion among historians. Some emphasize monasteries as centers of devotion. Others highlight their role as economic enterprises and land managers. Looking around now, it becomes difficult to separate the two. Prayer and logistics seem woven together like threads in the same cloth. You step into a covered yard, the wind greets you immediately. Not violently, but firmly. The storm has weakened compared with the previous night. Yet winter still owns the landscape. Snow covers roofs in thick layers. Icicles hang beneath eaves. The sky remains a uniform grey. Several brothers move carefully across packed paths cleared between buildings. Their footsteps crunch softly. One carries a basket. Another balances a bundle of tools on his shoulder. The entire scene feels muted. Snow absorbs sound. Even ordinary work becomes quieter. You pause near a stack of barrels. The wood is rimed with frost. Tiny crystals sparkle where pale daylight touches them. For a moment, everything seems suspended. A crow lands on a distant roof. Snow falls. A monk crosses the yard. The crow departs. Nothing dramatic happens. And somehow that feels deeply peaceful. Modern life trains people to expect constant stimulation. The monastery offers something different. Attention, simple attention. A barrel becomes interesting. A snowfall becomes interesting. The way light touches stone becomes interesting, because there is room to notice. One forgotten custom from certain medieval communities involved assigning specific work according to age, experience, skill, and physical ability. An elderly monk might oversee records, while younger brothers handled more demanding labour. Practical wisdom mattered. There was little point sending an aging scholar to wrestle logs through deep snow if someone else could do it more effectively. You smile at the sensible logic. The Middle Ages often receive unfair treatment. People imagine endless irrationality, yet many decisions inside a monastery were driven by straightforward practicality. Keep the roof intact, protect the food, care for the sick, store fuel, manage resources, avoid freezing, reasonable goals. All things considered, a bell sounds somewhere beyond the buildings, not the deep summons of night prayer, a smaller signal. Its tone drifts across the yard and fades into the snowy air. Nobody appears surprised. The abbey responds almost unconsciously. People adjust their movements, tasks shift. Work continues. The bell functions less like an interruption and more like a heartbeat. You begin to understand how time feels different here. There are no clocks in your pocket, no glowing numbers, no countdowns. The day unfolds through sound, habit, and observation. The sun hides behind clouds. The bells mark the hours. The body learns the pattern. You walk back toward the shelter of another passage. Warmth is too generous a word for the interior air, but the absence of wind feels luxurious. Your hands are cold. Your nose remains committed to reminding you that it exists. Yet there is satisfaction in seeing the hidden machinery of the monastery. The books in the scriptorium exist because someone stored parchment. The meals exist because someone counted grain. The prayers continue because someone maintained roofs, candles, and supplies. Nothing stands alone. Everything supports something else. The abbey is less like a collection of buildings and more like a living organism. Every task contributes to the whole. Every person depends upon everyone else. Outside, winter presses against the walls. Inside, discipline and labour push gently back. You continue through the corridor, listening to distant footsteps, the occasional creak of wood, and the soft murmur of work being done well. Ahead, another part of the monastery awaits, one devoted not to records, grain, or tools, but to the fragile business of caring for human bodies when winter, age, or illness begin demanding their own attention. The passage toward the infirmary feels quieter than the workyard. Not exactly, because nothing inside the monastery is truly sonant once you learn how to listen. The building murmurs in small ways, wood settles, footsteps fade around corners, a door latch clicks somewhere behind you. Snow slides from a roof with a soft, heavy sigh, but here the movement slows, the air changes. You smell herbs before you see the room. Dried mint, sage, rosemary, perhaps lavender, perhaps something sharper and bitterer hanging in bundles from beams or stored in small containers. The scent is mixed with smoke, warm cloth, stale breath, and the faint sourness of illness. It is not unpleasant, but it is intimate. It tells you at once that bodies are cared for here, and bodies are never as tidy as rules would like them to be. You step inside, the infirmary is warmer than the corridors, not modern warm. Please do not imagine central heating suddenly appearing like a miracle sponsored by future technology. But there is a hearth, or at least a carefully tended fire nearby, and the room holds its heat better than the stone passages outside. The difference is enough that your hands notice immediately. Your fingers loosen, your shoulders drop, your nose, after many hours of suffering with dignity, begins to forgive the 14th century a little. Several beds stand along the walls, each simpler than anything a modern hospital would accept, but better than the icy cell. Blankets lie thick over sleeping shapes. A monk sits upright, wrapped in wool, his face pale and tired. Another rests with eyes closed while an attendant adjusts a cover around his shoulders. Daily practice in many religious houses included some provision for sick or elderly members. Infirmaries could offer better food, more warmth, softer discipline, and special care when ordinary communal life became too demanding. Monks might live under strict rules, but a body with fever, age, or weakness required mercy, and monastic systems often made room for that need. You pause near the doorway, careful not to intrude. A brother working as an infirmarian moves between the beds with quiet confidence. He carries a small bowl in one hand and a cloth in the other. His motions are practical, not theatrical. He checks a cup, straightens bedding, speaks a few soft words to one patient, then turns toward the shelf lined with jars and bundles. The shelf draws your attention. There are dried leaves tied with string, small ceramic vessels, wooden boxes, mortars and pestles, folded cloth stained with years of use. Some remedies are based on experience, some are shaped by the inherited medical theory, some, if we are being gentle, are more hopeful than effective. Medieval medicine combines observation, tradition, religion, classical learning, and a confidence in bodily humours that modern science has politely asked to sit down. Still, the care is real, warmth is real, rest is real, clean cloth is real. Broth is real, attention is real, and sometimes those things matter very much. A rather unusual tradition appears in some medieval medical writings, where certain plants were valued not only for practical effects, but also for symbolic qualities, planetary associations, or religious meanings. A herb might be chosen because it had soothed coughs before, because an authority recommended it, or because its shape suggested usefulness. Medieval healing could be part medicine, part memory, part prayer, and part botanical guesswork with confidence. You watch the infirmarian crush something in a mortar, The soft grinding sound fills the space between breaths. Outside the window, snow still falls, faint and white against the dim morning. Inside, the fire makes a low crackling noise. A sick monk coughs, then settles. You feel the tenderness of the room. It is not sentimental, it is not decorated for comfort, but it is arranged around human frailty, and that makes it different from the rest of the abbey. The church lifts the mind upward, the scriptorium bends the body over books, the refectory feeds the community, the workrooms sustain the household, the infirmary emits something simpler. People break, people weaken, people need help. The exact quality of medical care in medieval monasteries remains difficult to generalize, since wealthy abbeys, poor houses, urban hospitals, and remote communities differed greatly. Some specialists emphasize the role of monasteries in preserving medical texts and herbal knowledge. Others caution that treatment could be limited, inconsistent, and deeply shaped by theories we no longer accept. The sources leave room for both respect and skepticism, which is a very medieval combination. You move closer to the hearth. The heat reaches your face. For the first time since entering the monastery, you feel something close to comfort, real comfort, the kind that makes your eyelids grow heavy and your thoughts soften. You understand why an infirmary might become a refuge even for those who are not dangerously ill. A warm corner in winter is powerful. Add broth and permission to rest, and frankly, the temptation is obvious. One can imagine a tired monk wondering whether a mild headache might justify an extended visit. Not that anyone here would exaggerate symptoms. Of course, humanity would never. A faint smile crosses your face. Then the older monk sitting upright looks toward you. His eyes are clear, though tired. For a moment, neither of you speaks. Speech may be limited, but kindness does not always need words. He gives the smallest nod. You return it. His hands rest outside the blanket, thin and lined. The skin around his knuckles is red from cold or ache. You notice how carefully the infirmarian has tucked the wool around him, leaving his hands free but his shoulders covered. Small act matter. In winter, a cup placed within reach, a bed moved closer to heat, a draught blocked with folded cloth, a broth warmed before it cools. None of these sounds grand in a chronicle, yet each one is part of survival. Or you think back to the cell where you slept, the bells that woke you, the plain bread, the scriptorium snow light, the cloister path. All of those places belong to discipline. This room belongs to mercy, not separate from discipline, just its softer side. Monastic rules could be strict, but they also recognize weakness. A rule that ignores human limits eventually damages the very community it tries to shape. Here, in the warm corner, the abbey seems to understand that holiness cannot require pretending bodies are made of stone. The fire shifts. A small flame rises and curls around a piece of wood. The room glows briefly. You breathe in the herbal air. It is thick, layered, almost sleepy. The infirmarian passes behind you, carrying a cup toward another bed. His sandals make almost no sound. A patient murmurs a word you cannot catch. Outside, the snow brightens slightly, as if clouds have thinned above the abbey. For a moment, time slows. The storm feels distant. The world beyond the walls feels even farther away. Here there is only warmth, breath, herbs, wool, and the careful tending of tired bodies. Then a bell rings again, soft but clear. The infirmarian lifts his head, listening. The older monk closes his eyes. The abbey's rhythm continues, even here, yet the infirmary does not hurry in the same way. The sick are not pulled instantly into motion. The weak are allowed to remain beneath blankets. The fire continues its work. The herbs keep their quiet scent. You step back from the hearth. The corridor outside waits with its cold grey air. You know the difference will be immediate. Still, you carry some warmth with you now, stored beneath your cloak and in your hands. As you leave the infirmary, you glance once more at the beds. the jars of the hanging herbs, the small fire, and the brother moving patiently from one person to the next. Behind you remains the abbey's most human room. Ahead, beyond the passage and the inner doors, the storm begins to strengthen again, pressing its white weight against roofs, walls, shutters, and every fragile plan made by those inside. The warmth of the infirmary leaves you slowly. At first it clings to your hands, your cheeks, the folds of your cloak. You carry it like a small secret through the passage, feeling almost comfortable, almost restored. But the monastery is patient. Stone takes back what fire gives, step by step. The corridor cools your fingers again. The smell of herbs fades behind you, replaced by damp wool, candle swoon, and the clean mineral scent of winter air. Then the wind rises. You hear it before you feel it. A long, low pressure moving across the abbey roof, gathering strength along the tiles, sliding beneath eaves, pressing itself into every seam it can find. The sound travels through the building like a warning spoken in a language older than walls. The storm has returned with purpose. A shutter bangs somewhere ahead, not once, again. Then a voice calls softly, quickly hushed, and footsteps hurry across stone. The abbey's calm does not break, but it tightens. You follow the movement toward a side passage where several brothers are already gathering. One holds a lantern, another carries a length of rope, a third has pulled his hood low and is fastening his cloak with hands that look red from cold. Their faces remain composed, but their bodies have the efficient alertness of people who know winter can turn small problems into large ones, while everyone is busy being poetic. A common feature of large medieval monasteries was constant maintenance. Roofs, walls, gutters, drains, barns, kitchens, stables, workshops, and guest spaces all needed care. Heavy snow and high wind could damage tiles, block doors, freeze water channels, or threaten outbuildings. Spiritual devotion did not make a roof leak less annoying. You reach a covered outer passage where the sound intensifies. Wind pushes snow across the openings in wild, pale streams. The flakes no longer fall gently. They travel sideways, sharp and restless, striking stone, wood, faces, hands. The world beyond the abbey has lost its edges again. The courtyard, roofs, walls, and distant buildings blur into moving white. A monk gestures for you to stay back. This is wise. You obey with no heroic protest. A door is open just wide enough for two brothers to slip through into the storm. The instant it cracks open, snow bursts inside like an excited animal. Cold air floods the passage. Your eyes water. The lantern flame bends low and nearly vanishes. The door shuts behind them. The passage exhales. For a moment everyone listens. Outside, voices are almost swallowed by wind. You imagine the two figures crossing the yard, heads bowed, robes snapping around their legs, feet searching for the path beneath new snow. They are not marching into battle. They are probably checking a roof, fastening a shutter, clearing a blocked drain, or making sure livestock are secure. The Middle Ages often saves its drama for practical errands. A peculiar note from medieval accounts is how often weather appears almost like a character. Chroniclers record harsh winters, heavy rains, ruined crops, strange storms, and bitter frost not simply as background, but as forces that shape hunger, travel, disease, taxes, and mood. Weather is not small talk when it decides whether roads exist. You stand with the remaining brothers in the passage. No one says much. The wind says enough. Snow has begun creeping under the door, forming a small white line at the threshold. A young brother notices and pushes it back with his foot, then seems faintly embarrassed by how pointless the action is. The snow returns immediately. Winter has excellent confidence. The lantern is set into a niche. Its flame steadies. Shadows tremble along the wall. From somewhere above comes a heavy thud. Everyone looks up. Mass of snow sliding from a roof, perhaps, or a loosened tile. The older monk near you closes his eyes briefly, not in panic, but in the weary expression of someone mentally adding another repair to an already crowded list. Specialists have reached no full consensus on how different monastic community balance contemplation with emergency labour during severe weather. Rules gave structure, but storms rarely ask permission from rulebooks. In practice, abbeys had to adapt. Bells might still ring, prayers might continue, but someone had to protect the food stores, the animals, and the roofs before damage spread. Another gust strikes. The door shudders in its frame. You feel the vibration through the floor. For the first time since arriving, the stone walls seem less invincible. Thick, yes. Old, yes. Strong, certainly, but not magical. The abbey survives because people keep maintaining it, because hands repair, because eyes watch, because someone wakes when something bangs in the storm. You think of the scriptorium manuscripts resting on tables, the grain sacks stacked in storage, the sick monks near the fire, the refectory benches, the narrow cells. All of it depends on roofs holding, doors closing, fires staying controlled, paths remaining passable. Shelter is never passive, shelter is work. The two brothers return after what feels like a long while, though perhaps only minutes have passed. When the door opens, they enter, wrapped in some snow. Their hoods are white, their shoulders glitter with ice. One carries a broken piece of wood, perhaps from a shutter brace. The other nods to the older monk and speaks quietly. You catch only fragments. Roof, west side, not yet, after prime. The old monk listens, then gives instructions with small hand movements. No great speech, no dramatic panic, just decisions. That steadiness impresses you. The storm is fierce, but the monastery has rituals for more than prayer. It has rituals of response, gather, check, report on, repair, to, continue. One of the more colourful details from the era involves the belief that certain storms could be interpreted as omens, warnings, or tests of spiritual endurance. Not everyone treated weather superstitiously, and practical minds still repaired roofs regardless, but a winter storm in a religious house could easily invite reflection. Is this merely wind? A trial? A reminder of human weakness, or just weather with terrible timing, perhaps all of those at once? You follow the brothers back toward the inner corridors, away from the door and the biting air. The storm remains audible everywhere now. It presses through the abbey like a second presence. In the cloister, snow blows beneath the arches. In the church, candles flicker with unseen draughts. In cells, blankets will be pulled tighter. In the kitchen, fires will be guarded carefully. In the infirmary, the weak will be kept close to warmth. The monastery becomes more inward, more alert. More itself. You pass a narrow window and pause. Beyond it, the world is nearly white. Not peaceful white, moving white, furious white. The wall beside the window is damp where wind has forced powder through tiny gaps. You touch the stone and feel wet cold on your fingertips. There is humility in this. You may be inside one of the safest places for miles, and still the storm finds ways to remind you that safety is partial and negotiated, never guaranteed. The abbey does not defeat winter. It endures winter. That difference matters. A bell rings through the corridors. Its sound is harder to hear now, blurred by the wind, yet it remains steady. The note travels from stone to stone, calling the community back into order. The storm may lean on the walls, but the day continues. You move with the others, your cloak pulled close, your ears filled with the roar outside. The abbey's rhythm does not cancel fear. It gives fear a place to stand, and as the wind circles the monastery, rattling shutters, sweeping snow across thresholds, and testing every hinge and tile, you begin to understand that the stone walls are not a barrier between human life and nature. They are a conversation with it. A long, cold, stubborn conversation. one that will continue through the day, into the evening, and perhaps deep into another night. The storm spends much of the afternoon testing the monastery, not dramatically enough to become a legend, not violently enough to tear down towers, but persistently, the sort of weather that keeps everyone paying attention. You move through the inner passages while wind rattles shutters and snow sweeps across the courtyards in shifting white ribbons. The abbey seems to draw inward around its hearths, kitchens, storerooms, and workrooms, becoming a tighter world enclosed against winter. It is during one of these quieter hours that you find yourself near the guest house. The building sits slightly apart from the more private spaces of monastic life. Its purpose is simple enough. Travellers arrive, travellers need shelter, travellers bring stories, mud, problems, requests, news, and occasionally unpleasant smells. Someone must receive them. Today the guesthouse lantern glows warmly against the grey afternoon. A small flame behind horn panels casts golden light onto the snow outside. The effect is surprisingly beautiful. In the middle of the storm, the lantern resembles a promise. You step closer. The wind immediately tries to discourage this decision. Snow stings your cheek. Your cloak snaps at the hem. The storm appears personally offended that anyone would voluntarily leave the protection of stone walls. Still, you reach the guesthouse entrance. Inside, warmth greets you. Not the concentrated warmth of the infirmary hearth. Something broader, more social. The air carries the scent of wet leather, drying wool, wood smoke, and food. Travellers' belongings rest against walls. Cloaks hang from pegs. Boots stand near a fire where they are attempting, with mixed success, to recover from the weather. A man sits near the hearth rubbing his hands together. Another dozes on a bench. A woman travelling with 2 children quietly rearranges blankets around them. The children are asleep despite the noise. Children possess a remarkable ability to sleep through circumstances that would inspire lengthy complaints from adults. You take a seat near the edge of the room. The fire crackles softly. Outside, the wind continues to roar. The contrast feels comforting. Many monasteries maintain traditions of hospitality, offering shelter to travellers, pilgrims, merchants, messengers, clergy, and visitors of various kinds. The quality of accommodation depended on the wealth and status of the institution, but hospitality was often considered an important religious duty. Looking around the room, it becomes clear that hospitality is not always elegant. Sometimes hospitality means dry boots, sometimes it means soup. Sometimes it means not freezing to death in a ditch. Those distinctions matter. A traveller near the hearth lifts a cup and takes a careful sip. His face is weathered and tired. Snow still melts from the edges of his cloak, judging from the mud dried across his boots. He has spent a considerable amount of time on roads that currently resemble frozen disasters. You feel a sudden appreciation for the monastery walls. Earlier they seemed austere, now they seem generous. Perspective changes quickly when snow is blowing sideways. A conversation unfolds quietly near the fire. You cannot hear every word, a village name, a road mentioned, a bridge discussed, the condition of a nearby route, news from another settlement, the sort of information that travels person to person long before newspapers exist. For a moment you realise something important. The monastery is not isolated, it only feels isolated. In reality it is connected to a web of villages, farms, roads, churches, markets, and travellers. Information flows through these walls constantly. News arrives with merchants, rumours arrive with the pilgrims, letters arrive with messengers, requests arrive with everyone. This guest house serves as one of those meeting points where different worlds briefly overlap. An anecdote preserved in later medieval writings describes travellers occasionally bringing highly exaggerated tales from distant places, giant fish, strange peoples, miraculous events, impossible weather, mysterious relics. Some listeners believed every word, others were considerably more sceptical. Human beings have always enjoyed dramatic stories, especially when sitting beside a warm fire during the unpleasant weather. The thought feels oddly familiar. The fire shifts. A shower of sparks rises briefly before vanishing. The children remain asleep. A monk enters carrying a basket. The room brightens slightly at his arrival. Not because of any special charisma, but because the basket contains food. Food improves morale with remarkable consistency across centuries. Pieces of bread are distributed, a pot follows, the smell spreads immediately, simple stew. Nothing luxurious, yet after a day of winter travel it may as well be a royal banquet. The travellers accept their portions gratefully. You notice how quickly the atmosphere changes. People sit a little straighter. Faces soften. Conversations become easier. The body rarely separates emotional comfort from physical comfort as neatly as we imagine. Warm food influences both. Outside, snow strikes the walls. Inside, spoons scrape bowls. The guest house feels almost like a separate kingdom within the monastery. Not because its purpose differs entirely, but because it contains uncertainty. The monks know tomorrow's schedule. The travellers do not. The monks belong here. The travellers are passing through. Their stories stretch outward into roads hidden beyond the storm. You wonder where they came from, where they are going, how many days they have travelled, whether they left families behind, whether someone waits for them elsewhere. The surviving records rarely answer such questions completely. Many ordinary lives pass through history, leaving only faint traces: a name in an account book, a payment, a note about lodging, a mention in correspondence, then silence. Yet sitting here, these travellers feel entirely real. The woman adjusts a blanket around one child. The man near the fire rubs an old injury in his shoulder. Another traveller stares into the flames with the distant look of someone mentally calculating miles. Every person carries a private story. The monastery provides shelter for only one chapter of it. A bell sounds faintly somewhere deeper in the abbey. The monks respond instinctively. The travellers barely notice. That difference interests you. Within the monastery, bells organise life. Outside, roads organise life. One world moves according to prayer, another according to weather, markets, obligations, opportunities, and distance. The guest house stands between them. Researchers examining medieval hospitality sometimes disagree about how accessible different monasteries were to strangers. Wealth, location, local politics, available resources, and religious customs all played roles. Some houses welcomed visitors generously, others were more selective. The reality likely varied considerably from place to place. Today, however, the storm simplifies the question. Anyone arriving through that weather clearly needs shelter. The wind suddenly surges again. The walls groan softly. Several people glance toward the door. For a brief moment, the entire room listens. The fire crackles. The storm answers. Then life resumes. Someone laughs quietly and a bowl is refilled. A child rolls over in sleep. The lantern beside the entrance flickers. Its light shines through the small window panel and spills onto the snow outside, where flakes continue racing through the darkening afternoon. You sit for a while longer, enjoying the warmth. The guest house feels alive in a different way from the church, the scriptorium, or the cloister. It contains arrivals and departures. It contains uncertainty. It contains stories still unfolding. Eventually you rise. The fire remains behind. The travellers remain behind. The smell of stew and wet wool remains behind. You step back into the corridor and listen briefly to the storm pressing against the walls. The monastery continues its steady rhythm. Yet beyond those walls, countless roads disappear beneath snow, and somewhere out there, other travellers are still searching for the next lantern in the winter darkness. The smell reaches you before the doorway appears, smoke first, then onions, then something earthy, warm and softening, a pot. After the guest house, with its wet cloaks and travellers' stories, the kitchen feels like the beating stomach of the monastery. You follow the scent through a passage where the stone walls are darkened slightly by years of smoke drifting from nearby fires. The air grows warmer, thicker, busier. Then you step inside. The kitchen is alive. Not loud in a modern restaurant way, with shouting and clattering and someone dramatically discovering that the sauce is split. This is a quieter busyness, shaped by habit. A fire burns low and steady beneath a large pot. Steam rises in slow folds. Wooden bowls are stacked along a table. A lay brother stirs something with a long-handled spoon, his face flushed from the heat. Another sorts dried peas or lentils, picking through them with a patient motion that suggests he has done this many times and has made peace with her fate. The storm outside may be wild, but in here everything obeys the pot. You stand near the wall and let warmth press against your face. It is glorious, not luxurious, not delicate, glorious. The kitchen smells of survival becoming edible. A pot of lentils or peas might not sound thrilling to modern ears, especially if your idea of dinner involves 5 choices, 3 sauces, and a small dessert you pretend you are sharing. But in this room, on this day, with snow striking the abbey and travellers drying by the guesthouse fire, the humble pot becomes central. Medieval monastic kitchens prepared meals not only for monks, but often for guests, servants, workers, the poor at the gate, and sometimes the sick with separate allowances. The exact scale depended on the house, but food preparation was a major daily operation. Feeding a religious community required planning, storage, fuel, labour, and timing. You watch the brother stir. The surface of the pot shifts thickly. Lentils, perhaps, onions, leeks, herbs, salt if available. Maybe a little fat, if rules and supplies permit. Perhaps nothing more dramatic than water and patience. The steam carries a smell that settles directly into your bones. Your stomach, despite having met bread earlier, becomes interested again. This is how kitchens work. They convince the body that it has been neglected. A worker brings in a basket of root vegetables, snow still clinging to the sides. He stamps his boots near the threshold, not enough to be rude, just enough to avoid dragging the entire courtyard indoors. The cook gives him a look that says both thank you and do not make more mess than necessary. You recognise that look. It is universal. It has probably existed since humans first discovered floors. A small curiosity survives in medieval household records, where kitchen roles could become highly specialised in larger institutions. There might be bakers, brewers, cooks, servers, cellarers, gardeners, and people responsible for specific stores. The larger the house, the more food became an organised system. Dinner, it turns out, has always required management. The room is not perfectly clean by modern standards. Of course it is not. There is ash near the hearth, vegetable skins in a basket, damp footprints near the door, smoke stains above the fire. But it is orderly in the way the working rooms are orderly. Tools are where hands accept them, bowls are stacked, fuel is kept ready, knives are wiped and set aside. Nothing is decorative. Everything earns its place. You move nearer to a table where bread is being cut. The knife presses through dense loaves with effort. Each piece lands heavily on the board. There is no abundance for waste here. Portions matter. The cellarer, the official responsible for stores and provisions in many monastic houses, would need to think carefully about supplies, especially in winter. How much grain remains? How many guests arrived unexpectedly? How many sick brothers need richer food? How long will the storm block roads? Food is never just food. It is arithmetic with consequences. The answer may have differed from one abbey to another, but scholars continue to explore how far monastic diets varied between strict ideals and daily realities. Some communities followed severe discipline. Others, especially wealthy houses, developed diets that were more generous than reformers liked. Rules could be clear, but human appetite has always been an excellent lawyer. You almost laugh at that thought. Then the cook lifts the spoon from the pot. A thick drop falls back into the stew. The sound is soft and satisfying. He tastes it carefully, eyes narrowing. This is the moment when all kitchens, past and present, become sacred. Someone judges the pot, not by theory, by experience. Does it need salt, more thyme, more water, a little herb, a prayer, possibly all of the above? The cook adds something from a small container, not much. He stirs again, slowly, folding the flavour through the hole. Steam rises around him, blurring his face for a moment. Outside, the wind pushes against the walls. Inside, the fire pushes back. You notice how the kitchen reverses the storm's meaning. Outside, cold turns water into ice, stiffens roads, and hides fields. Inside, heat softens vegetables, loosens grain, and makes hard things edible. The kitchen is transformation. Dry peas become pottage. Hard bread becomes something to dip. Stored roots become comfort. Smoke becomes warmth. Labour becomes meal. A younger brother carries bowls toward the doorway. Another follows with bread. Perhaps some goes to the refectory. Perhaps some to the guest house. Perhaps some to the infirmary, thinned or enriched depending on need. The monastery's rooms are connected by food as surely as by corridors. A monk copying scripture cannot work without eating. A traveller cannot continue without strength. A sick brother cannot heal without nourishment. A worker cannot clear snow with an empty stomach. So the kitchen, smoky and practical, quietly supports every holy hour. Medieval life occasionally reveals something wonderfully odd in dietary classifications. In some places and periods, certain animals were treated with surprising flexibility for fasting purposes, because rules about meat, fish, and water creatures could become complicated. Later stories about beavers or other creatures being considered acceptable in restricted diets may sound like loophole comedy, but they reflect a real habit of fitting nature into religious categories. The human mind, when hungry, becomes impressively theological. The fire snaps, a spark rises and disappears into the smoke-dark space above. You hear bowls being filled. The sound repeats, ladle, pour, ladle, pour. It becomes almost hypnotic. You could fall asleep standing here, which would be unwise near an open hearth, but understandable. The warmth wraps around you. Your cold hands relax. Your damp clothing begins to release faint steam near the edges. For a moment, the kitchen becomes the most comforting place in the world, not because it is beautiful, because it is useful, because it says, in its smoky practical language, "You may continue." That is what food says in winter. You may continue. You glance back toward the doorway, where cold air still waits in the corridor. Beyond that corridor are the cloister, the scriptorium, the church, the cell, the guest house, the infirmary, the workyard, the storm. The cook stirs the pot once more, then another bell rings. Not urgent, never exactly optional. The kitchen continues moving. Bowls are carried, bread is stacked. The fire is tended, the pot is not abandoned. Monastic time may be ruled by bells, but stew has its own schedule and refuses to be rushed. You step back into the passage with smoke in your hair and warmth beneath your cloak. Behind you, lentils simmer. Ahead, the sound of bells begins to gather through the stone, calling the abbey into another measured hour while the blizzard listens at the walls. The bell does not simply ring, it travels. Its sound moves through the kitchen smoke, through the dim passage, through the cold stone under your feet. It slips beneath doors, crosses the cloister, touches the guest house, reaches the infirmary, and disappears into the storm beyond the walls. For a few moments, the whole monastery seems to become an instrument, built not only of stone and timber, but of listening. You stand still. The final note fades slowly, then another follows, measured, patient, firm. Outside, The blizzard does its best to swallow the sound. Wind pushes against the tower. Snow whirls around the upper openings, yet the bell remains clear enough to guide everyone inside. You begin walking with the others. The corridor is colder after the kitchen. Smoke still clings to your clothing, and the warmth of lentils and fire slowly loosens its hold on your skin. Ahead, monks move toward the church again, their steps quiet and familiar. No one needs to ask what the bell means. The sound itself is instruction. In a monastery like this, time belongs to bells more than to clocks. Mechanical clocks are beginning to appear in parts of medieval Europe around this broad period, but for most daily life, especially inside religious communities, bells, daylight, candles, prayers, and habit organize the hours. A bell is not background noise, it is a command, reminder, a pulse. You follow the line through the cloister. Snow blows beneath the arches in pale streaks. The garth has nearly vanished under deeper drifts. The square garden you circled earlier now looks smoother, heavier, more withdrawn. Each gust sends powder rising from its surface like breath. The bell rings again. This time you hear how the storm changes it. The note bends slightly, not in pitch exactly, but in feeling. Near the tower, it must be strong and metallic. Here, through wind and stone, it becomes softer, rounder, more distant, like memory arriving from another room. You pass a monk whose hood is dusted with snow. He brushes one shoulder with 2 quick fingers and keeps moving. Another steadies himself near a slick patch along the walkway. No laughter this time. The ice has earned respect. The door to the church opens, cold follows you inside. The nave is dim and shadowed, but candles burn before the altar. Their flames flutter, answering hidden drafts. The church seems larger in storm weather, perhaps because the outside world has disappeared. When there is no horizon beyond the walls, the vaults above you become the sky. You take your place among the others. Wood creaks, robes settle, breathing slows. Then the chant begins. The sound rises against the weather. There is something deeply moving about voices singing while wind throws snow against stone. Not because the chant defeats the storm, it does not. The storm continues quite confidently, but the chant offers another order, one made of breath, memory, and shared rhythm. You hear the bell's echo still in your mind, till its pattern lingers beneath the chant. A detail that rarely appears in films is how many different bells a medieval religious house might use. Depending on wealth and size, bells could signal prayer, meals, labour, danger, death, visitors, or important communal events. Their meanings were learned through repetition. To the community, each sound carried information. To a visitor, at first, it might seem like a mysterious bronze animal shouting from a tower. You are learning, slowly. The bell that dragged you from sleep earlier felt almost cruel. Now it feels steadier, almost reassuring. A storm changes how you hear things. When the world outside grows uncertain, any familiar sound becomes precious. The bell says the tower still stands. The rope still pulls. The community still gathers. The day has not dissolved into weather. The chant continues. Latin syllables move through the cold air. You do not catch every meaning, but the rhythm becomes physical. It settles into your shoulders. It steadies your breathing. You feel the tiredness of the day gather in your legs, the stiffness from walking cold corridors, the heaviness of bread and pottage, the lingering smell of smoke. All of it comes with you into the church. No one here is floating above the body. They are cold. They are tired. They may be hungry again. One may be thinking about a leaking roof. Another may be worried about the travellers in the guest house. Another may be silently hoping the kitchen saved enough stew. And still they chant. That is perhaps the most human part. Devotion does not erase ordinary discomfort. It carries on through it. Different readings of monastic evidence suggest that bells could feel both comforting and demanding. To some, they created sacred rhythm, pulling the mind back toward prayer. To others, at least at times, they must have interrupted sleep, work, private thought, or simple human rest. The same sound can be mercy and burden, depending on the hour and the listener. You understand both, especially the sleep part. The service passes slowly. Outside, wind rises again. For a brief moment, it roars so loudly that the chant seems small. A candle guttering near the side aisle nearly goes out, then recovers. The monks do not turn. The voices continue. The sound of prayer threads itself through the storm as if through cloth. You imagine the bell tower above. Thick timbers, dark space, rope hanging downward. Bronze bell swinging in cold air. Perhaps frost clings near the openings. Perhaps snow gathers on ledges. Perhaps the bell ringer's hands ache around the rope. This is not effortless music. Someone must climb, pull, maintain, listen, and repeat. Every symbol has a worker behind it. That thought returns often in the monastery. Behind the manuscript, a scribe. Behind the bread, a baker. Behind the fire, someone splitting wood. Behind the bell, hands on rope. Behind the calm, labour. The chant fades, silence follows. Then the bell rings once more. Not from inside the church now, but from memory and vibration. Carried through the stone, you feel, rather than hear it for an instant, as if the abbey itself is humming. When the brothers rise, the movement is slow. The storm has dimmed the day, making afternoon feel like evening. You follow them out, back into corridors where the bell's note still seems to hang in the air. Near a narrow window, you stop. Snow blurs everything. The road beyond the outer wall is invisible. The fields are gone. The trees are ghosts. Yet the bell has travelled into that whiteness, even if only a little way. Perhaps a traveller outside hears it faintly and turns towards shelter. Perhaps villagers nearby measure the hour by it. Perhaps the sound disappears after a few yards, defeated by wind. No one can say with certainty how far a bell carried during a storm like this. Air, wind direction, landscape, tower height, and the bell itself all mattered. But the idea is enough. A note moving outward through snow, a small human claim against confusion. You pull your cloak closer. The cold, glassy light touches your face. For the first time, you feel how much medieval time depends on sound, surprise. Without bright screens or precise personal clocks, the world is heard as much as seen. Bells speak across distance. Roosters announce morning. Footsteps tell who approaches. Wind tells weather. Chant tells hour. Silence tells discipline. You turn away from the window. The bell has called. The abbey has answered. And now the storm gathers toward evening, while hidden in another part of the monastery. Old books wait in dimness, holding stranger voices than the bells, quieter voices, written in margins, copied by tired hands, and kept safe from snow by walls that are still holding. The light fades earlier than you expect. Perhaps it is the storm. Perhaps it is the heavy clouds pressing low over the countryside. Perhaps it is simply winter reminding everyone who truly controls the schedule. Whatever the reason, the monastery begins slipping toward evening long before your mind feels ready for it. The corridors darken, windows lose their pale glow. Snow beyond the walls becomes a shifting grey curtain. You find yourself drawn toward one of the quieter corners of the abbey, a place that feels removed even from the monastery itself, the library. The room is not grand, at least not in the way modern libraries often imagine themselves. There are no towering shelves stretching endlessly into darkness, no dramatic spiral staircases, no secret mechanical doors waiting for adventurous scholars. Instead, there is wood, stone, shelves, chests, tables, books, and silence. A different silence from the cloister, a different silence from the church. This one feels attentive, as though the room is listening to itself think. A lamp burns near a table. Its small flame reflects from metal fittings and polished wood. The light does not reach every corner. Shadows occupy much of the room. Gathering between shelves and beneath beams, you move slowly. Books in 1321 are precious objects, not merely because of what they contain, because of what they cost. Every page required labour, every binding required labour, every letter required labour. The manuscript you admired earlier in the scriptorium did not appear by magic. Someone prepared the parchment, someone copied the text, someone corrected mistakes, someone bound the volume, someone protected it from dampness, insects, fire, and carelessness. Knowledge here has weight, literal weight. You stop before a shelf. Several volumes rest side by side. Leather covers, wooden boards, metal clasps. Some are worn smooth from years of handling. Others appear rarely touched. You imagine the hands that have opened them. Generations of readers, generations of monks, winter after winter. One book might contain scripture, another sermons, another legal records, another writings copied from authors who lived centuries earlier. The room feels less like storage and more like conversation stretched across time. A faint draught slips beneath a door. The lamp flame trembles. You glance toward the nearest window. Outside, snow continues drifting through the darkening afternoon. Inside, words wait patiently. The contrast is striking. The storm erases. Books preserve. One shelf holds several large volumes chained to a desk. The chains catch your attention immediately, not because they seem oppressive, because they seem practical. Books are expensive, extraordinarily expensive. Leaving one unattended would be rather like leaving a chest of valuables sitting in the courtyard and hoping everyone behaves perfectly. The chains allow access while discouraging disappearance. Human nature, it seems, was understood quite well. You smile at the thought. A monastery may trust souls. It still locks valuable objects. Near another table lies an open manuscript, not abandoned, simply waiting. The ink has darkened beautifully with age. Decorative initials curl through the margins. Tiny flourishes appear where a scribe once allowed himself a little artistic satisfaction. Then you notice something else, a small drawing, almost hidden, tucked into the edge of a page. A face, not a saint, not an angel, just a face. Slightly exaggerated, perhaps humorous, perhaps accidental, perhaps a private moment of creativity preserved for centuries. You stare at it longer than expected. There is something strangely intimate about such details. The official text may discuss theology or law. The little drawing reminds you that a human hand held the quill. A human hand became bored, or amused, or inspired, and left behind a trace. Tiny, personal, enduring. In another age, someone might have doodled in a notebook margin during a meeting. Some habits survive every century. The deeper you look into medieval manuscripts, the more often such moments appear, small illustrations, corrections, notes, tiny observations inserted between formal lines. The official purpose of a book and the private personality of its maker occasionally meet on the same page. You continue through the room. The shelves seem to contain more than books. They contain patience. Nothing here was produced quickly. Everything represents accumulated effort. That realization slows your thoughts. Modern life rewards speed. The monastery rewards endurance. A page copied carefully. A roof repaired before winter, a bell rung every day, a garden tended each spring, a prayer repeated for years. The library feels like the physical shape of that philosophy. Outside, a gust strikes the wall. The sound arrives muffled through stone. The books barely notice. For a moment you imagine how many storms they have already survived. Not just this one, hundreds, winter after winter. Year after year, kings rise, kings die, Roads change, villages grow, wars begin, wars end. Meanwhile, a manuscript sits quietly on a shelf waiting for someone to open it. That thought carries unexpected comfort. Not because books are immortal, they're not. Fire remains terrifying, damp remains dangerous, time remains relentless, yet enough survives, enough passes forward, enough endures. You reach a corner where several older volumes rest in a chest. Their bindings are cracked, their pages uneven. The room smells slightly different here. Dry parchment, dust, old leather, a scent almost impossible to describe. Not unpleasant, simply ancient, the sort of smell that convinces you a room has memories. One of the fascinating challenges facing modern historians is that surviving libraries represent only fragments of what once existed. Some texts vanished entirely. Others survive in a single copy. Some monasteries preserved works that might otherwise have disappeared. Other collections were scattered, damaged, or lost. The silence of history often comes from missing shelves. That idea lingers with you. How many voices are absent? How many stories vanished? How many ordinary people passed through centuries without leaving more than a faint trace? The library cannot answer. It simply preserves what remains. A sound reaches you, soft, unexpected, a page turning. Across the room, an elderly monk sits beneath a lamp. You had not noticed him before. His shoulders are wrapped in wool. His face is lined. One hand rests against the page while the other turns it carefully. He reads without hurry. The storm could continue all night. The bell will ring again. Supper will come. Darkness will deepen. Yet for now he reads. You watch quietly, and the image feels almost timeless. A man, a book, a lamp, winter beyond the walls. No spectacle, no grand revelation, just attention. Perhaps that is why libraries feel sacred even outside religious settings. They encourage stillness. They reward patience. They ask nothing except presence. The monk turns another page. The lamp flickers. Snow brushes softly against the window. You remain there for several minutes, listening to tiny sounds that would be lost almost anywhere else. Leather shifting, paper moving, flame whispering, wind breathing. Then the bell rings once more, distant, steady. The note enters the room and settles among the shelves. The old monk closes the book, not reluctantly, not eagerly, simply because the hour has changed. That is the rhythm of the monastery. Everything has its time. Even reading. You take one final look around. The shelves disappear into shadow. The chained volumes rest quietly. The small face in the manuscript margin remains hidden where you found it. Outside, snow continues falling. Inside, centuries sleep on wooden shelves. You leave the library carrying the scent of parchment and dust, stepping back into the corridor where evening gathers and where the monastery prepares for the quieter, more personal hours that arrive after daylight finally surrenders to winter night. Evening settles through the monastery slowly, like ash drifting through cold air. You leave the library with the smell of parchment still caught in your clothing, and for a while the corridor feels almost empty after the quiet company of books. The bell's last note has faded, yet its memory remains in the stone. Somewhere behind you, the old monk has likely returned the volume to its place, and the little face in the manuscript margin has gone back to hiding in the shadow of a page. Ahead, the abbey grows dimmer. The storm outside has thickened again, not with the wild violence of earlier, but with a steady insistence. Snow brushes against shutters, wind slides around corners, the roofs groan softly under their white burden. The building seems to draw its cloak closer. You follow a side passage where fewer people move. Here the monastery feels less communal, less organized, more inward. The great routines remain. Of course, bells still govern the hours, prayers still wait, supper will come, Complina will close the day. Yet between those public moments, a person is left alone with whatever thoughts winter has stirred up. You pass a half-open door. Inside, a small lamp burns. A monk sits on a low stool near the wall. His hood is pushed back. His hands rest loosely in his lap. He is not reading, not writing, not praying in any obvious way. He is simply sitting, looking at nothing. You almost continue. Then he turns his head slightly, not startled, only aware. His face is younger than you expected, not a boy, not old, a man still somewhere in the middle of his life, old enough to have chosen this path, young enough to remember that other paths existed. He gives a faint nod. You return it. No words pass between you. The silence is permitted to remain, and somehow, in that quiet exchange, you sense the hidden human side of the abbey. The monastery can appear from outside like a single thing: stone walls, bells, robes, chant, rule, order, but inside those robes are individual minds, each carrying its own weather. Not every storm is outsayer. He looks back toward the lamp. The flame trembles, reflecting in his eyes. You wonder what he's thinking. Perhaps of family, perhaps of a village road now buried under snow, perhaps of vows spoken years earlier, perhaps of nothing grand at all. Maybe he is simply tired and wondering whether the next meal will involve lentils again. Spiritual life does not eliminate lentil fatigue. The thought brings a small kindness to the scene. Monastic vows asked much from those who took them. Stability, obedience, chastity, poverty in varying forms depending on order, and a life shaped by a prayer rather than personal ambition. Such vows could offer purpose, safety, learning, and community. They could also ask a person to surrender freedom, family life, property, and private desire. The same walls that protect can also confine. You feel that truth more clearly in this side passage than anywhere else. In the church, the abbey feels majestic. In the kitchen, practical. In the library, patient. Here, beside a quiet monk and a small lamp, it feels personal. The man reaches toward a string of beads or a small devotional object lying beside him. His fingers touch it, then stop. He does not pick it up. He simply rests his hand there, as if the object itself is enough contact for now. The exact inner lives of medieval monks remain mostly beyond recovery. Rules, sermons, letters, visitation records, and spiritual writings reveal ideals and complaints. But they cannot fully tell us how one tired man felt on a stormy evening in 1321. Some found deep peace in the cloister, some struggled, most surely experienced both at different moments. The surviving evidence invites humility. It is easy to turn the past into types. The devout monk, the corrupt monk, the cheerful scribe, the severe abbot, the sleepy brother. Real people were rarely that simple. You linger near the doorway, feeling the cold creep around your ankles. The lamp's little circle of light does not reach far. Beyond it, the cell is bare, much like yours: a bed, a stool, a shelf, a cloak hanging from a peg. The simplicity that felt safe last night now seems more complicated. What would it do to a mind to live so plainly? Perhaps it would clear it, perhaps it would burden it, perhaps both. Outside, the wind presses softly at the wall. The monk closes his eyes, not asleep, not quite praying, something in between. You think of the first night in your own narrow bed, when the wool scratched your chin and the storm made the abbey feel like the last inhabited place in the world. You had only to endure one night. He may have endured hundreds, thousands, winter after winter. Bell after bell, silence after silence. There is bravery in that, though not the sort that appears in songs. A small and oddly touching detail from monastic records is that some communities paid close attention to discouragement, melancholy, or what religious writers sometimes called spiritual dryness. They did not always understand it as modern people might, but they recognized that a person could become heavy in spirit. The remedy might be prayer, confession, work, guidance, reading, or simply the steady support of community. The monk opens his eyes again. For a brief moment, his expression looks almost amused, as if he has caught you thinking too seriously on his behalf. Perhaps he is not in crisis at all. Perhaps you, with your modern imagination, have draped him in dramatic loneliness while he's merely waiting for the bell and enjoying a rare quiet minute. Fair enough, the past deserves dignity, not melodrama. Still, the room holds a kind of tenderness, a person alone with thought, a lamp in winter, a storm beyond stone. Every age understands this. You step back from the doorway, giving him privacy. He lowers his head slightly, and you continue down the passage. The corridor bends toward the inner part of the abbey. Your own footsteps sound softer now. You pass another closed door, then another. Behind each one could be prayer, sleep, worry, annoyance, memory, patience, doubt, or simple boredom. The monastery contains all of it. People outside it might imagine monks as permanently serene. You know better now. You have heard the suppressed laughter in the night. You have seen the half-asleep faces at meals. You have watched cold hands around cups, bent backs over manuscripts, careful steps on icy stone, and the tired efficiency of storm repairs. Holiness here is not a glow around perfect people. It is a pattern ordinary people keep returning to. That makes it more impressive, not less. A bell begins to ring in the distance, calling the community onward. The note moves gently through the passage. The monk's door remains open behind you, his lamp still burning. You imagine him rising, pulling his hood into place, stepping back into the shared rhythm. Whatever thoughts visited him in that small room will come with him, softened perhaps, or simply carried. The monastery asks each person to bring the whole self to the next hour. Faith, fatigue, doubt, hunger, cold feet, all of it. You move toward the sound of the bell, while outside the winter storm continues beyond the walls, and inside the abbey every quiet heart prepares to enter the night together. The bell draws you away from the quiet passage and back into the shared body of the monastery. Evening has fully arrived now. Not suddenly. Nothing here seems to happen suddenly unless a shutter breaks or snow slides off a roof. The dark has gathered by slow degrees, filling corners first, then corridors, then the spaces between candle flames. The abbey feels smaller after sunset. The walls press closer. Doorways become darker. The outside world disappears completely, leaving only the sound of weather and the narrow islands of light held by lamps. You move with the others toward the church for compline, the final office of the day. By now, your body recognizes the path, the turn near the cloister, the colder stretch of passage beside the outer wall, the worn threshold where countless feet have crossed, the faint scent of wailed before the church door. Repetition has begun to work on you. Earlier, every movement felt strange. Now the monastery's pattern folds around your steps. You do not fully belong here, not really, but the abbey has allowed you to borrow its rhythm for a night. Inside the church, candles burn low. Their light gathers along the edges of stone columns and leaves the upper vaults in shadow. The storm outside has quieted again, but the roof still murmurs under the wind. Snow brushes softly against high windows. The church seems to breathe in long, cold intervals. The monks take their places. You stand among them, tired in a deep physical way. Your legs remember the cloister path. Your hands remember the infirmary warmth. Your nose remembers kitchen sun smoke. Your stomach remembers lentils. Your mind remembers the library's little hidden face in the margin. All of it gathers here. At the end of the day, compliners are closing, a final folding of the hours before sleep. In many medieval monastic routines, the day ended with this office, followed by the great silence of the night. After Compline, speech was usually restricted even more strongly. The community moved toward rest, not casually, but with the same deliberate attention that shaped prayer, meals, work, and reading. The chant begins. It is softer than earlier services, or perhaps you hear it that way because you are tired. The voices rise gently, not to command the space, but to settle it. The sound does not fight the darkness. It seems to tuck the darkness around the abbey like a blanket. You listen. The words flow past you in Latin, steady and familiar to those who sing them. You catch only fragments, but the feeling is clear. Protection, mercy, night, rest. The human hope that sleep will be sea, till that the body will be guarded, that the soul will not wander too far into fear. It is easy to forget how dark night once was. True night, no electric street lamps, no glowing windows, no distant traffic, no screen beside the bed, just flame. Moon, stars if the clouds allow them, and the vast uncertain blackness beyond walls. In such a world, evening prayer carries weight. It is not a decorative habit, it is a way of entering danger gently. The chant continues. A monk near you sways slightly, catching himself before sleep claims him too early. You pretend not to notice. After the day he has had, he deserves mercy. Somewhere in the long history of monasteries, many tired brothers must have fought this same battle with heavy eyelids, and one suspects the eyelids won more often than official records prefer to admit. The thought is tender rather than mocking. Everyone here is human. Even the voices chanting with such discipline belong to bodies that ache, hunger, chill, and occasionally wish the straw mattress were softer. At the close of the office, silence settles. Not ordinary silence, night silence, the kind that feels like a door being gently shut. The monks begin to leave. No chatter follows, no lingering conversation, no jokes spoken to the church door, only footsteps, wool, breath, and candlelight moving through dark corridors. You follow them back toward the cells. The passage feels colder after the church. Perhaps the hour has deepened. Perhaps your body, warmed by standing among others, notices the chill more sharply. The stone floor sends cold through your shoes. Your cloak brushes against the wall. Somewhere ahead, a lamp is carried carefully through shadow. After Compline, the monastery belongs to quiet. Even practical sounds seem gentler. A door closes softly, a cough is muffled. A footstep pauses at a threshold. The abbey is not asleep yet, but it is preparing to sleep. You reach your cell. The door looks exactly as it did before. Plain, dark, slightly warped with age. Yet it feels different now because you return to it carrying a full day inside the walls. When you first entered, the cell seemed bare almost to the point of insult. Bed, stool, shelf, peg, that was all. Now its bareness feels less hostile. It belongs to a larger pattern. The refectory feeds you, the church gathers you, the cloister steadies you. The scriptorium preserves memory. The infirmary warms frailty. The guest house shelters strangers. The kitchen keeps the body going. The cell gives you back to yourself. You step inside. The darkness is close. A small lamp or the candle gives just enough light to see the bed and the folded blanket. The straw mattress waits with its usual lack of enthusiasm. The wool blanket lies heavy and rough. An old companion now, still scratchy, still useful, still not interested in luxury. You close the door, the sound is soft. The cell becomes its own small world. Outside the room, the corridor quiets. Beyond the corridor, the monastery rests. Beyond the monastery, the storm moves across fields and roads. You remove your cloak slowly and hang it on the peg. The fabric is drier than last night, though it still carries the smell of smoke and winter. Your hands move with care, partly from cold, partly from the mood of the hour. Compline has made even ordinary gestures feel deliberate. You sit on the bed, the straw rustles beneath you. There it is again. That dry sound has become familiar. You pull off your shoes and feel the cold floor for one brief, unpleasant moment before tucking your feet onto the bed. The body learns quickly. Tonight you waste less time proving the floor is acceptable. The sources leave much unsaid about the private emotional texture of a monastic sleep. Rules describe arrangements, silence, and discipline, but they cannot fully capture the feeling of lying alone after the final prayer while winter presses at a narrow window. The details must be imagined carefully, from stone, wool, weather, and the daily rhythm that led you here. You lie down, the blanket comes over you. At first, cold surrounds your body in the hollow beneath the wool. Then warmth begins to gather, slowly, made by your own breath and skin. The cell does not provide comfort easily. It requires negotiation. You turn onto your side facing the wall. The stone is close enough to touch. You do not touch it. You have learned. The window slit admits a faint grey suggestion of snowlight. Outside, the storm is quieter now. Though not gone, it whispers along the walls. Occasionally a gust sends powder against the opening with a soft hiss. The sound is no longer frightening. It is part of the room. Your thoughts slow. The day moves backward through memory. The lantern at the guest house, the pot of lentils, the bell bending through the blizzard, the old monk turning a page, the younger monk sitting beside his lamp, the snow-covered garth, the scratch of quills, the hard bread, the first bell before dawn. The cell has collected them all. Now it gives them back in fragments as you lie beneath rough wool in the darkness. You understand why sleep after Compline is not merely the end of activity. It is the closing of a circle. The monastery has guided the body through its hours, and now, at last, the body is released into rest. No grand comfort, no soft mattress, no warm modern room, just stone, straw, wool, silence, and the distant breathing of winter. And somehow, tonight, it is enough. Your eyelids grow heavy, the darkness softens, the monastery holds its great silence around you. Beyond the walls, snow continues falling through the medieval night, covering roads, fields, roofs, and footprints, while inside the little cells you sink slowly towards sleep after Compline. The night deepens around your cell, not dramatically, not with a sudden plunge into darkness. The change happens so gradually that you only notice it when you realise the narrow window slit no longer carries even the faint grey glow of snowlight. Whatever light remains belongs entirely to the small flame beside you. The lamp flickers, the stone wall catches its glow and gives it back reluctantly. You lie beneath the rough blanket and listen. The monastery has entered a different phase of the day now. Earlier there were footsteps in corridors, bowls moving through kitchens, bells calling brothers from one duty to another. Now the building has become quieter, not silent, never truly silent. The abbey is too alive for that. Somewhere a beam settles with a low creak. Somewhere a sleeper turns beneath wool. Somewhere a door moves slightly in its frame as wind presses against it. The sounds are small enough that you might have missed them yesterday. Tonight you hear every one. The cell has trained your attention. You pull the blanket higher. It still scratches your chin. Some things never improve, yet the wool no longer feels unfriendly. In fact, you are becoming strangely attached to it. The thought would have horrified the version of you who arrived yesterday. That person expected comfort. This person understands survival. The difference matters. Outside, snow continues falling. You cannot see it directly now, but you hear it from time to time, a faint brushing sound against stone, a soft hiss near the opening of the window slit. Occasionally a small clump slides from somewhere above and lands with a muffled thump. The storm has become quieter, though not weaker, like a large animal settling into place. It occurs to you that most people in 1321 knew winter in a way modern people rarely do. Not as scenery, not as seasonal decoration, as a physical reality. A roof had to hold, firewood had to last, food had to remain available, roads could disappear, water could freeze. Every snowstorm carried practical consequences. You imagine the fields beyond the monastery, invisible now beneath darkness and drifting snow. Months earlier they would have been green, then harvested, then stripped bare. Now winter keeps them hidden, waiting. Everything seems to be waiting tonight. The fields, the roads, the trees, the abbey itself, even your thoughts. You roll slightly onto your back. The ceiling remains lost in shadow. The flame beside the bed trembles again. For a moment it brightens, then settles. The movement draws your attention to the tiny window. A thin lace of ice has formed around the edges. You had noticed traces of frost earlier, but now the pattern has grown more elaborate. Delicate branches spread across the stone like pale roots. You study them. The design appears random, yet not random. Balanced somehow. Beautiful in a way that feels accidental. No monk carved it. No artist planned it. Winter made it. The sight reminds you of the illuminated letters in the manuscripts, different in every practical sense, yet strangely similar. Both transform simple surfaces into patterns. Both reward patience. Both ask you to look closely. Your eyes begin to grow heavy. Still, sleep does not arrive immediately. The day has left too many impressions. The guesthouse lantern, the old monk reading, the younger monk sitting quietly beside his lamp, the smell of herbs in the infirmary, the bell carrying through the storm, the kitchen fear, the snow-covered garth. Each memory drifts through your mind and settles. Not in order, not logically, the way memories always do when sleep approaches. You wonder briefly about the travellers. Are they asleep yet, the man with the weathered face? The woman with the children? The road will still be waiting tomorrow, assuming tomorrow allows travel at all. Then your thoughts wander toward the library. The little face hidden in the manuscript margin returns unexpectedly. You imagine some long-dead scribe smiling to himself while drawing it. Perhaps he worried someone would notice. Perhaps he hoped someone would. Centuries later, you are still thinking about it. A surprisingly successful piece of communication. The flame dips lower. The room darkens. You become aware of another sound, breathing, not yours. At first you cannot place it. Then you realize it comes faintly through the wall. Another monk sleeping in another cell. The sound is barely audible. Yet it changes the feeling of the room. You are alone, but not entirely alone. The monastery surrounds you. Cells beside cells, room beside room, life beside life, everyone enclosed in their own small space, everyone participating in the same night. The thought is comforting. Human beings often sleep better when they know others are nearby, even strangers. Perhaps especially during storms, the breathing fades, or perhaps you simply stop noticing it. Your own breathing slows, the blanket grows warmer, the straw mattress shifts beneath your shoulder, still not comfortable, still not soft, but familiar. That may be enough. The flame shrinks again. A little pool of wax gathers beneath it. Soon someone will extinguish lamps throughout the monastery. Or perhaps many already have. The darkness waiting beyond the tiny circle of light feels immense, yet it no longer feels threatening. The abbey has spent an entire day teaching you how to trust it. Not blindly, not completely. Roofs can leak, storms can worsen, people can become ill, supplies can run low. The world remains uncertain, but uncertainty does not prevent test. That may be one of the monastery's greatest lessons. You do not need guarantees in order to sleep. You need shelter, routine, community, a blanket, a wall between yourself and the wind. The rest is hope. You close your eyes. The sound of snow returns, very faint now, almost imagined. The lamp flickers once more, then steadies. Your thoughts drift. Somewhere above, the tower bell waits for another hour. Somewhere below, embers continue glowing in kitchen hearths. Somewhere in the library, books rest quietly in darkness. Somewhere in the infirmary, a sick brother sleeps near warmth. Somewhere beyond the walls, Snow settles onto roads that no one will walk until morning. The entire monastery seems suspended between one day and the next. You drift with it, not fully asleep yet, not fully awake. Just floating in the gentle middle place where thoughts soften, sounds blur, and winter night wraps itself around stone walls that have been keeping watch for generations. Sleep takes you gently, and the monastery begins to loosen its edges. The stone wall near your face remains there, solid and cold, but it no longer holds the room as firmly as before. The straw beneath your shoulder softens into something less definite. The wool blanket becomes a hillside, then a cloak, then a patch of darkness gathered under your chin. You drift, not into bright dreams, not into adventure, into the quiet kind of dream that belongs to winter sleep, when the body is tired, the room is cold, and the mind walks slowly through places it has not actually visited. At first, you are still inside the cell. The window slit glows faintly with snowlight, though you know it should be dark. Frost curls along the edges in fine white lines. The sound of the storm is distant now, softened by sleep, as if the wind has moved several valleys away. Then the wall opens without opening, and you are outside. Not standing in the storm exactly, floating through it. The monastery walls rise behind you, dark and massive, their roofs heavy with snow. The tower is half hidden in mist. No bell rings. No monk crosses the courtyard. The abbey rests like a great sleeping creature in the white night. Beyond it, the road lies buried. You follow it anyway. Snow covers the ruts, the stones, the frozen mud, the footprints of the travellers who arrived at the guest house. You think of the man by the fire, the woman covering her children, the boots placed near the hearth. In waking life, they remained inside. In the dream, their traces continue outward, stretching into fields and villages you never saw. The countryside opens before you. Hedges are softened into low white walls. Trees stand black against the pale ground. A stream moves under ice, making a sound like someone whispering beneath glass. No lanterns appear at first. Only snow, only the road, only the faint sense that people live somewhere beyond the darkness. Then a village gathers slowly out of the night. A cluster of low houses, thatched roofs loaded with snow, smoke rising from the holes or chimneys where fires still burn. A small church tower, shorter than the abbey's, barely visible through the weather. The village is not silent. It only seems so from a distance. As you drift closer, you hear life beneath the storm, a dog barking once, then deciding the matter is not worth further effort, a door opening, a child coughing, a woman stirring embers, a man stepping into the yard to check on animals, regretting the decision instantly, and probably making a face very similar to yours when your feet touch the cell floor. History often remembers monasteries in stone and parchment, but most people in the medieval world lived in humbler spaces, shaped by fields, animals, seasons, rents, obligations, and family labour. The abbey is one kind of shelter, the village is another. Both depend on stored food, fuel, and luck. Both listen to winter with respect in the dream. You pass through a comprehensive mail as easily as breath through cloth. Inside, a family sleeps near the hearth. The fire is low but alive. The room smells of smoke, straw, bodies, wool, and something sour from yesterday's cooking. Tools hang from beams, a pot rests near embers, a bundle of kindling sits carefully stacked where children cannot scatter it, though children across all centuries have rarely respected such plans. A woman wakes briefly, turns toward the fire, and closes her eyes again. The house is not peaceful in the romantic sense. It's cramped, cold at the edges, dark and crowded with useful things. Yet it holds warmth. It holds people. It holds the small, stubborn refusal to surrender to winter. You drift onward. The dream carries you past barns where animals shift in their sleep, Oxen breathe steam into cold air. Chickens huddle in offended silence. Sheep stand close together. Wool touching wool. The smell is strong enough to reach even through dreaming. Medieval village life is not scented like fresh linen and lavender. It is manure, smoke, damp straw, and survival. Cozy. Yes, if you are generous, fragrant. But not in a candle shop way. The road continues. Farther away, a manor house sits on slightly higher ground, its windows dark and its roof white. Somewhere inside, servants sleep lightly, ready to rise before dawn, and somewhere nearby, stored grain is counted, rents remembered, tools repaired, disputes waiting for better weather. The social world beyond the abbey is layered, with obligations running between peasants, landlords, clergy, merchants, and officials. No one lives entirely alone, even when snow makes every house look like an island. You pass another lane. A small shrine stands where paths meet. Half buried in snow, someone has left a sprig of greenery there. Now, frosted white. Perhaps it was placed in devotion, perhaps in habit, perhaps because someone's grandmother insisted it was wise, and no one wanted to argue. Medieval belief often lived in these small gestures, not only in grand churches or formal prayers. A crossed path, a saint's day, a calm, a blessing, a candle, a scrap of cloth tied near a holy place. Some practices were approved, some tolerated, some frowned upon, and some probably continued because people are very determined when anxious. You move beyond the village, the land opens again. Fields sleep beneath snow. A line of woods rises in the distance. Somewhere in those trees, animals move unseen. Deer pick carefully through buried ground. Foxes trace paths under hedges. Birds shelter in branches, their bodies puffed against cold. The storm belongs to them too, though they have no walls, no bells, no refectory, no monk checking supplies. You think of the abbey library, where books preserve names and ideas, then of these fields, where most lives leave little record, a ploughman's breath in winter, a mother's hand over a sleeping child, a servant carrying water, a shepherd counting animals before a storm. How much of history is made from such moments? Almost all of it, yet so much passes without writing. The dream becomes softer, the village fades behind you. The abbey appears again in the distance, its tower rising from the white dark. You feel yourself drawn back toward it, toward the stone cell, toward the scratchy blanket, toward the window slit edged with frost. As you approach, you see the guesthouse lantern still burning near the outer court. Its little glow touches the snow in a circle of gold. The travellers sleep inside, the monks sleep within their cells, the sick rest near the infirmary fire, the books lie closed. The kitchen embers breathe red under ash. The monastery is no longer separate from the world beyond it. It is part of the same winter, one shelter among many, one rhythm among many, one human answer to cold, darkness, hunger, fear, and time. You return through the wall. The dream folds inward. The cell gathers around you again. Stone, straw, wool, frost, breath. You are lying on your side, warm beneath the blanket, though your nose is still cold enough to maintain a private complaint. The storm whispers outside. The abbey sleeps around you. Somewhere far away, perhaps only in memory, a dog barks once in the village and then gives up, a very sensible creature. You sink deeper into sleep, carrying with you roads buried under snow, cottages glowing faintly in darkness, fields waiting for spring, and the quiet knowledge that beyond the abbey walls, countless ordinary lives are dreaming through the same winter night. You wake before the bell. At first, you are not entirely certain why. The dream of snowy roads and sleeping villages fades slowly, leaving only fragments behind: a lantern in the guest house, a cottage hearth, a barking dog that wisely decided winter was not worth arguing with. The images drift away like mist, and you find yourself once more inside the small stone cell. Darkness remains, yet something has changed. You lie still beneath the blanket and listen. The storm is quieter, not gone, just different. The wind no longer throws itself against the walls with the same determination. Instead, it moves around the abbey in long, gentle breaths. Snow still brushes the window slit occasionally. But the sound has softened. You realize this is what woke you. The absence of noise, the change. The monastery notices weather the way sailors notice waves. Even asleep, you have begun listening for it. You remain beneath the blanket. The wool has finally achieved what seemed impossible yesterday. It has become comfortable, not because it changed, because you changed. Your body learned the room. Your expectations adapted. What once felt rough and inadequate now feels familiar. A lesson hidden inside many forms of history. People adapt more quickly than they imagine. The darkness is complete except for the faintest suggestion of grey near the window. Dawn is still distant, yet it is coming. You can feel it. The night has reached that peculiar hour when everything seems suspended. No prayers yet. No footsteps. No bowls, no bells. Just waiting. The abbey feels enormous in these moments. Not because you can see it, because you can imagine it. Cells stretching away through darkness, the church standing silent beneath its vaults, the library sleeping with its shelves of parchment, the kitchen hearth resting beneath ash, the guest house full of travellers, the infirmary warm around its small fire. Everything exists at once, quiet and unseen. You think of the old monk reading beneath the lamp. Perhaps he sleeps now. Perhaps he wakes easily with age and is already lying awake, listening to the weather. You think of the younger monk sitting alone with his thoughts. Perhaps he is dreaming. Perhaps he's snoring. Monastic records are frustratingly incomplete on the subject of snoring. A great loss to scholarship. The thought makes you smile into the blanket. Outside, a small sound reaches the window. Not wind, something else. You listen carefully. A scrape, then another. Slow, measured, snow being moved. Someone is already awake. You imagine a brother clearing a path before dawn, pushing aside drifts that gathered during the night. The work is not glamorous. No manuscript will celebrate it. Yet by breakfast, everyone will use that path without thinking about who cleared it. The monastery depends upon countless invisible acts. That truth has followed you through every room, the cook stirring lentils, the infirmarian adjusting blankets, the scribe sharpening a quill, the brother carrying firewood, the person ringing the bell, the person repairing the shutter. Most of the abbey's life happens in tasks too ordinary to attract attention. Yet together they hold the whole place upright. The grey light at the window grows slightly stronger, not enough to illuminate the room, enough to reveal shapes. The peg on the wall, the edge of the stool, the outline of your cloak. The world begins returning. You sit up slowly. The blanket falls from one shoulder. Cold air immediately takes advantage of the opportunity. Winter remains extremely committed to its responsibilities. You pull the wool closer again, outside the slit. Dawn gathers behind the clouds. The storm has left its mark. Snow clings to the edge of the opening. Ice traces delicate lines through the mortar. The sky beyond is pale and colourless, somewhere between silver and ash. You move carefully toward the window. The stone beneath your bare hand is cold enough to make you reconsider the decision. Some lessons also require repetition. Through the narrow opening you glimpse part of the courtyard. Snow lies deep across every surface. The cleared paths have almost disappeared beneath fresh drifts. Roofs wear thick white caps. The cloister arches emerge from the pale landscape like dark brushstrokes. The entire monastery looks transformed. Yesterday you walked through it. Today it resembles something carved from winter itself. A faint figure moves across the courtyard. One of the brothers. The scraping sound continues. Path clearing, slow progress, necessary progress. The figure seems tiny against the walls, yet somehow reassuring. Human effort made visible. The sky brightens another shade. You realize how much medieval mornings depended upon natural light. Work, reading, travel, and daily routines all shifted with season and weather. A cloudy winter dawn offered far less useful light than a clear summer morning. Time itself felt different across the year. In modern life, a switch changes darkness into brightness. Here, dawn negotiates. Slowly, patiently, the figure below continues working. Scrape, pause, scrape, pause. The rhythm is almost meditative. You watch for a while. Eventually the brother stops, straightens, and rests his hands on the shovel handle. Even from this distance, you sense the moment of stillness, a person alone in a snowy courtyard looking at the day ahead. Then he returns to work, no speech, no audience, just another necessary task. The sight stays with you, perhaps because it captures something essential about the monastery. The bells matter, the prayers matter, the manuscripts matter, but so does the path. People must reach the church, the kitchen, the guest house, the infirmary. The path makes all those things possible. You step back from the window. The room is brighter now. Not bright, simply visible. The outlines of objects sharpen. The rough texture of the wall emerges. The straw mattress looks exactly as unimpressed as ever. Soon the bell will ring. Soon the monastery will woo. Soon voices will chant and fires will be stirred and bread will be cut and another day will begin. Yet this brief moment before all that feels precious, a monastery is often imagined through ceremonies and rituals. You're beginning to think its truest character may appear in these quieter spaces between them. A cleared path, a warming fire, a sleeping traveller, a page waiting for ink, a blanket holding warmth, a brother working before dawn while snow still falls. The bell has not rung yet. The day has not officially started, and yet life is already underway. You sit once more on the edge of the bed and pull the blanket around your shoulders. The grey light continues spreading through the cell. The storm has loosened its grip. Winter remains, cold remains, snow remains, but something else has arrived as well. Morning, quietly, patiently. Without announcement, the abbey waits for the bell. You wait with it. The bell finally rings. It comes gently through the grey morning, not as a shock, but as something the monastery has been expecting all along. You're sitting on the edge of the bed with the blanket around your shoulders when the first note reaches the cell. It moves through stone and air, through the narrow slit of the window, through the wool gathered at your neck. You do not groan this time. That feels like progress. The second note follows, then the third. Outside. The brother in the courtyard pauses in his snow clearing and looks toward the tower. His shovel rests against the drift. For a moment, he's perfectly still in the pale morning, a dark figure surrounded by white. Then he resumes his work, because bells may guide the soul, but snow still blocks the path. You rise. The cold floor greets your feet with the same unfriendly honesty as before. You dress slowly, pulling your cloak around you, tying it with stiff fingers. Your body knows the room now. You no longer fumble for the peg. You no longer underestimate the floor. You no longer expect the blanket to behave like a cloud outside your door. The corridor is dim but waking. One door opens, then another. A monk steps out, hood low, face still heavy with sleep. Another follows, adjusting his sleeve. Farther down the passage, someone suppresses a cough into folded cloth. No one speaks. The great silence of night is lifting, but it does not vanish all at once. It thins slowly, like mist. You join the movement. The monastery has changed overnight. Snowlight fills corners that yesterday were shadowed. The storm has covered even familiar places in new softness. The passages feel colder, but calmer. The air no longer trembles with hard wind. It carries the clean scent of fresh snow, smoke from banked fires, and the faint memory of damp wool drying somewhere out of sight. You pass the window where you watch the courtyard. The path is clearer now, not fully cleared. Nothing here is ever finished quickly, but a dark line cuts through the snow, connecting one doorway to another. By breakfast, most people will walk that path without thinking. It will simply exist, as if winter courteously moved aside. You know better. A brother's cold hands made it possible. That small knowledge changes how you see everything. The refectory benches, the kitchen bowls, the candles, the books, the dry cloak hanging on a peg. Each ordinary thing carries invisible work behind it. You move toward the church with the others. The cloister is breathtaking in the morning. The arches frame a world remade in white. The garth lies smooth and full, its buried plants hidden beneath snow. Along the roof edge, icicles catch the weak light. Drops fall from them one at a time, touching the stones below with tiny dark marks. The storm has not ended entirely. A few flakes still drift down, slow and uncertain, as though the sky is deciding whether to continue. You step carefully over an icy patch near the corner. The memory of yesterday's warning remains. Medieval dignity is fragile on frozen stone. The church door opens. Inside, the air is cold enough to make your breath visible. Yet the space feels gentler than it did in the storm. Candles burn with steadier flames. The windows hold a faint grey glow. Shadows remain beneath the vaults, but they are even softer now, less like darkness and more like rest. The monks take their places. You stand among them. The morning office begins. Voices rise, a little rough with sleep, then settle into harmony. The chant does not feel grand today. It feels practical, almost tender. A way of placing the first sound of the day into order before work begins again. The old monk you saw in the library stands not far away. His face is calm. The younger monk from the lamplit cell is nearby too, hood drawn low, eyes fixed ahead. Whatever thoughts occupied him last night have either passed, been folded away, or come along quietly into prayer. That is often how people survive their inner weather, not by solving everything before dawn, but by rising anyway. You chant as much as you can, mostly you listen. The sound carries upward into the stone. And for a moment you feel how many mornings like this have filled the church before, some in storms, some in spring light, some after harvests, some after sickness, some after news from distant roads. The abbey keeps receiving mornings, one after another, and shaping them into prayer. When the office ends, the community begins to move. No one rushes. The day opens in layers. Some brothers turn toward the cloister, others toward workrooms. A few toward the kitchen. The infirmarian moves with steady purpose, likely back toward the warm room where the sick still sleep or wait. The guest house must be stirring too. Travellers will be waking under borrowed blankets, testing boots, asking about roads, deciding whether courage or common sense should win today. You follow the path toward the courtyard. Fresh air meets you. Cold, clean and bright. The snow has made the monastery feel larger and quieter at once. Every sound is softened. A door closing becomes a low thud. Footsteps become muted crunches. A shovel scraping stone sounds almost musical. You stop near the edge of the cleared path. Across the courtyard, a roof begins to shed snow in slow motion. A thick layer loosens, slides, pauses, then falls with a soft, heavy collapse. Several birds lift from the far wall, startled into the pale sky. The sky. For the first time, you notice a break in the clouds. Not sunlight exactly, not yet, but a brighter seam. High above the roofs, The storm is loosening its grip. Someone nearby looks up as well. No one says anything, as no one needs to. A change in weather is a kind of news. In the guest house doorway, one of the travellers appears, wrapped in a cloak, hair tousled from sleep. He looks out at the courtyard, the path, the sky and the depth of snow. His expression says several things at once, none of them enthusiastic. Travel may wait. A child peeks from behind him, sees the snow, and brightens immediately. Adults see blocked roads, children see possibility. A very old historical truth, probably. You walk slowly along the cleared path. Snow rises on either side, low but definite. The surface underfoot is packed and slick. The walls around you are damp with melting frost. From the kitchen comes the smell of smoke and something warming, again in a pot. Not lentils perhaps, or perhaps lentils. Returning like a determined medieval theme. Your stomach accepts the possibility with less resistance than expected. You have changed. The Abbey has changed you in small ways. You notice warmth differently, food differently, silence differently, a bell differently. Even a cleared path now seems worthy of gratitude. At the far side of the courtyard, you pause and look back. The monastery stands around the white centre of the morning, its roofs heavy, its windows narrow, its walls dark against the snow. It no longer feels like a fortress against the world. It feels like a vessel that carried everyone through the storm. Monks, travellers, sick brothers, workers. You, the storm has not vanished. Winter has not ended, but the morning has arrived, and in its pale brightness, the Abbey begins again, not with triumph, but with a shovel, a bell, a pot warming in the kitchen, a chant fading in cold air, and the slow opening of another day behind stone walls. Morning peace does not arrive all at once. It gathers, first in the softened wind, then in the pale seam of brighter cloud above the roofs, then in the tiny drops falling from icicles along the cloister edge, then in the faces of people who begin to realize the worst of the storm has passed. You stand in the courtyard with your cloak wrapped close, breathing air so cold and clean it feels almost sharp enough to ring. Snow lies everywhere, thick and white, smoothing the monastery into gentler shapes. The walls look older in this light, and also kinder. Their rough stones hold patches of frost. Their shadows fall blue-grey across the cleared path. The Abbey has survived the night, not untouched. No place survives winter untouched. A shutter needs repair. A roof must be checked. Paths must be cleared again. Supplies must be counted. Travellers must decide whether the road is safe. The sick still need warmth. The kitchen still needs fuel. The bell will ring again whether anyone feels poetic about it or not. But something has changed. The storm no longer commands the whole world. You walk slowly toward the cloister. Your steps press into packed snow with a soft crunch. The sound is quiet, satisfying, almost private, around you. The monastery resumes its small movements. A brother carries kindling, another scatters something gritty on a slick patch. The traveller's child from the guest house laughs once, quickly hushed by an adult, though even the adult seems less stern than necessary. The cloister arches open before you. Inside the covered walkway, the air is still. Snow has drifted along the inner edge, but the path remains passable. The garth lies buried under a smooth white blanket. Yesterday it was garden. Last night it was dream. This morning it is silence made visible. You pause near one arch. A drop falls from the roof, then another. Not Thor exactly, but not spray. Let us not become too optimistic. It is still 1321 still winter, still a place where comfort must be earned one fire and one blanket at a time. But the storm is loosening, that is enough. You think back to your first arrival at the gate, when the Abbey rose from the snow like a stern stone answer to a very bad travel decision. You remember the narrow cell, the scratchy blanket, The bell before dawn, the hard bread, the snow light on parchment, the quiet circle of the cloister, the work beneath wool, the infirmary herbs, the guest house lantern, the kitchen smoke, the hidden face in the manuscript margin, the lonely monk beside his lamp, the frost at the window slit, the dream of villages beyond the walls. All of it remains with you, not as separate scenes now, as one long winter memory. The monastery has taught you through repetition, through cold, through small discomforts that became familiar. It has shown you that peace does not always feel soft. Sometimes peace is rough wool, sometimes it is a bowl of plain food. Sometimes it is a path cleared before dawn by someone whose name you may never know. A bell rings. This time its sound moves through clear air. No blizzard bends it. No roaring wind swallows it. The note travels cleanly over the courtyard, across the cloister, into the guest house, into the kitchen, into the cells, into the pale fields beyond the walls, somewhere outside. Perhaps a villager hears it faintly and knows the abbey is awake. You listen until the sound fades. Then you step into the church one last time. The morning light is still weak, but it enters more freely now. High windows glow with colourless brightness. Candles burn along the altar. The stone floor is cold beneath your feet. The air carries wax, damp wool, and the faintest trace of incense. The monks gather again. Their voices rise. You do not try to follow every word. You let the chant pass through you. It feels less like an event now and more like breathing. The abbey inhales silence, exhales prayer, inhales work, exhales rest. Day after day, storm after storm, generation after generation, you stand quietly among them, aware of your own body, your cold hands, your tired legs, your softened thoughts, your strange affection for a blanket that would absolutely fail at a modern hotel review. When the chant ends, no grand farewell occurs. The monastery does not perform endings. It continues. Monks move toward tasks. The cook returns to the fire. The infirmarian returns to his beds. The scribe will eventually return to parchment when the light improves. The brother with the shovel will return to the snow. The travellers will study the road and make their choices. You step back outside. The clouds have thinned enough for a muted brightness to spread across the snow, not full sun, but a promise of it. The courtyard glows softly. Icicles shine. The tower stands calm above the roofs. For a moment, you simply breathe. The air enters cold and leaves warmer. You understand that the monastery was never separate from winter. It was a way of living with it, not defeating it, not escaping it, living with it through walls, bells, food, work, prayer, books, stimamia, and shared endurance. That is what you carry with you now, the knowledge that comfort can be simple. That routine can steady fear, that ordinary hands keep history alive, that even in a storm, a small lamp at a guesthouse door can matter. You turn once more toward the cell where you slept. It is hidden behind stone and passageways, just one small room among many, yet you know it now. You know the bed, the stool, the window slit, the frost, the wool, that held you for one winter night and gave you back to morning. The abbey bell rests. Snow falls only lightly now. The world is quiet enough to hear drops falling from the roof. One, then another, then another. The day has begun, and behind the stone walls of the monastery, winter is no longer an enemy at the gate, but a presence slowly settling into peace. Now let the abbey fade gently as the courtyard softens, the bell grows distant, the snow no longer stings, no longer rushes, no longer presses hard against the walls. It falls in slow, patient flakes, each one settling without hurry on roof, path, garden, and sill. You are warm enough now, not perfectly warm, just enough to rest, enough to breathe slowly, enough to let the stone walls become a shelter in your imagination, holding back the dark while the small sounds of winter continue beyond them. Somewhere in the monastery, a fire settles under ash. Somewhere, A book lies closed. Somewhere, a tired monk sleeps with his hood folded beside him. Somewhere, the guesthouse lantern burns low for anyone still looking for safety through the snow. And you can leave the abbey now. You do not need to walk quickly. You do not need to finish any task. You only let the image grow softer. The cloister arches blur into grey. The garden becomes a white square of quiet. The church grows still. The cell waits empty, its rough blanket folded, its narrow window glowing faintly with morning light. The storm has passed. The walls remain, and the world beyond them is calm, wide, and hushed beneath winter's pale sky. So let your breathing slow, let your shoulders loosen, let the last bell note drift farther and farther away, until this is only memory, then only silence, then only the gentle feeling of being held somewhere safe while snow falls softly outside. Good night, rest now, and may your dreams be quiet as a monastery after snowfall. Sweet dreams.